Chapter 6:11. After Elvis finished speaking, he directly walked past Leah. Leah looked at Elvis's back view and smiled. That's why you are Mengming's first partner. If it was me, I might not be able to be as tolerant as you. Swaying his tail, Leah glanced sideways at Barit, Oriton and Oakley, who had been standing silently behind him. My two guardians and acting witch doctor, are you still in a daze? The three who were called looked up at Leah in silence, each with their own thoughts written clearly on their faces. Leah chuckled. Although Mengming is very powerful now, this is not a reason for you to neglect taking care of her. Put away that useless inferiority complex and find a new position for yourself. With that, Leah swayed his large tail and chased after Elvis. Reposition? In the past, the most important task was to protect Gu Mengming's safety. But now, it seemed like there was no need. In that case, where exactly should their new position be? On the other side, Gu Mengming sat on the stairs outside the stone house, looking at Sandy, who was feeling rather uneasy. She knew that they could no longer go back. Her mentality had changed along with the 1,000 years of memories. She hadn't forgotten Sandy, but she couldn't play around with her like before, cupping her face, teasing her that she was the most beautiful female in the world, and if she was a male, she would definitely marry her. Now she could no longer say those words. And after that incident, Sandy had stopped Colin from saving Gu Mengming. Even though Gu Mengming did not blame her, she still felt extremely guilty. After that incident, Colin was relieved of his duties as a guardian. He did not say anything and only comforted her not to let her imagination run wild. But she knew that every time Colin saw Barit, he could not hide the envy in his eyes. Originally, he could also be a guardian who worked for the messenger of the beast deity. But because of her selfishness, it had turned into this situation today. She felt guilty towards Gu Mengming, and also towards Colin. Now, Sandy did not even have the courage to hold Gu Mengming's little hand when she stood in front of her. You two changed your routine? Gazing at the wind with deep feelings? Leah swayed his large tail, and leaned into Gu Mengming's arms. He looked at Sandy nonchalantly and teased. Or could it be, you have fallen out of favor? Like I said, how can your little stubby tail compete with me? Our Mengming still favors us. Don't you think so, Elvis? Elvis was not as good at concealing his emotions as Leah was. He only cleared his throat and did not say a word. Oriton followed Leah out, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. When Barit came out, he saw Sandy and asked, "Where's Colin? He didn't come with you?" Sandy whispered, "Send me there, then he'll go back." Barit understood that Colin was too ashamed to see Gu Mengming. Oriton went hunting. He said he wanted to share dinner with us tonight. Oakley and I will go find some yellow gravy and roast the meat tonight, alright? Barit asked Gu Mengming. Gu Mengming understood that everyone was trying to coax her, but she just could not bring herself to smile. There was no other problem. He raised his head and looked at everyone's expectant gaze. Not wanting to spoil the mood, Gu Mengming nodded. All right. Chapter 6:12. As a human, the biggest problem with a mature mentality is that many things can be seen clearly at a glance. Elvis and Lee's accommodating attitude, Oriton and Barit's silent companionship, Oakley's hesitation and Sandy's expectant yet uneasy gaze. Gu Mengming could not breathe from the intense concern, but she did not want to let down these people who were concerned about her. Gu Mengming smiled and nodded at Sandy, saying, "Come earlier tonight, let's have a gathering." Sandy then smiled and nodded heavily. The moment she turned around, Gu Mengming saw tears welling up in her eyes. After Sandy left, Barit and Oakley also set off to look for a beehive nearby. Gu Mengming leaned against Lee's chest tiredly, her gaze landing on Elvis's face, looking straight at his worried gaze. She wanted to smile, but the corners of her mouth were too heavy, so she could only give up in the end. Then she said calmly, "I just can't get used to these 1,000 years of memories, nothing else. You guys don't have to worry so much." Elvis walked in front of Gu Mengming, held her hand and pulled her into his arms. He hugged her tightly, wishing he could squeeze all his warmth into her body, then use his own body to replace her in enduring those 1,000 years of boring and dry memories. But, even if he was the first partner, there were still some things he could not do. No matter how strong you are, You are still my weakness. Not worrying about you might be something I will never learn in this lifetime. Gu Mingming hugged Elvis back, gently pressing her face against his chest. She lowered her eyes and said slowly, I'm sorry. Leah also stood up from the stairs, presenting his handsome and flawless face, kissing Gu Mingming, who was in Elvis's arms. His gentle smile seemed to condense the mysteries in the deepest part of the ocean, as if he was trying to drown her. His voice was slightly hoarse, but with a different kind of ambiguity. You clearly know that compared to an apology, we prefer to hear your confession. Gu Mingming bit her lower lip, but could not say a word. Her feelings towards Elvis and Leah were undeniable, but she could not say the words I like you now. Leah did not force her, he just rubbed Gu Mingming's little head and said, Today is the first time I'm attending a gathering with you as an official partner. If you don't smile, people will think that you were forced to mate with me. Gu Mingming looked at the half-genuine, half-fake grievance in Lee's eyes and her gaze softened. I am the messenger of the beast deity. Who can force me if I don't want to? Leah walked to the other side of Elvis and placed his arm on Elvis's shoulder. He said with a sad look, You said you liked me on the day of the warrior selection in Sauter, but you ended up crying so hard that you were about to stop breathing when you returned. That night, Oriton came to tease me. He said, How much does Gu Mingming dislike you? You cry like this just because I say I like you. Gu Mingming looked at Leah imitating Oriton's expressionless face and cold tone, and felt that it was rather comical. She finally curled her lips and laughed softly. Seeing that Gu Mingming finally smiled, Leah put in more effort and continued. After that, I fought with him and guess what happened? Gu Mingming shook her head, indicating that she did not know. Leah raised his head proudly and said, Although we are both third-level beasts, his brain is not as good as mine, so he naturally could not gain the upper hand. Aside from the topic. Chapter 6:13. Gu Mingming was just about to praise Leah when she heard Elvis say calmly, I remember when you came back that day, your face was swollen and bruised. You didn't look like you took advantage of me at all. Gu Mingming was stunned for half a second before she raised her eyebrows and poked Elvis's chest lightly. Leah was indeed so anxious that he started messing around with Elvis. Elvis hugged Gu Mingming and didn't want to bother with him, so he just burrowed into Gu Mingming's arms and whimpered for Gu Mingming to make the decision for him. Smile. Gu Mingming tried her best to smile. Exposing each other's secrets was one of the tacit understandings they had developed over the years, right? When she was upset, they cooperated and coaxed her. If she still didn't smile, these two fellows would definitely be more worried. Mummy! Jiaoyu rushed out of the house and directly pounced into Gu Mingming's arms. Gu Mingming caught hold of her son, who was at the height of her thigh, and carried him up with one hand. She gently tidied his messy hair from running, and rubbed his pair of wolf ears lovingly. Out of the three sons who had evolved into half-orcs, Rigiula's evolution was the worst. Other than having a pair of wolf ears, he still had a tail that had not evolved. Gu Mingming guessed that it was because Jiaoyu was the most affected by her genes that his evolution was not smooth. This made Gu Mingming feel very apologetic towards Jiaoyu. If it was because of her genes that Jiaoyu failed to evolve and ended up being a half-orc, what would happen to his life? She didn't even dare to think about it. What's wrong? Gu Mingming tried to make her voice sound gentle. She didn't want her emotions to affect the children. Even though the children were so sensitive, she still hoped to minimize the impact. Jiaoyu's thoughtfulness was just like Gu Mingming's in the past. His deep amber eyes were like the warm sun when he smiled. His young face had the unique innocence of a child, and he smiled innocently and warmly. I eavesdropped on your conversation just now. Jiaoyu covered his little mouth and secretly told Gu Mingming this little secret. His eyes were filled with pride and some joy. Gu Mingming felt a little unreasonable and didn't understand what Jiaoyu meant. She just said softly, It's not right to eavesdrop on others. Jiaoyu blinked his eyes and tilted his head to look at Gu Mingming. Why not? Daddy Leah said that we should try our best to grasp all the details, so that we can control the situation to the greatest extent and protect Mother. Gu Mingming turned to look at Leah. Leah cleared his throat and tried to clear his name. But I didn't teach him to eavesdrop. Jiaoyu frowned and pouted his lips. He looked at Leah with a threatening gaze. Leah gave in and leaned forward, whispering, "Don't betray me. I will teach you the art of deduction." Jiaoyu then nodded in satisfaction, before smiling sweetly at Gu Mingming. "Yeah, Daddy Leah never taught me to eavesdrop on others." 3 black lines hung over Gu Mingming's head. Jiaoyu was now in her arms, and after integrating Snake's abilities, her hearing was extremely good. Shouldn't he keep this kind of under-the-table operation a secret from her? Wouldn't it be too fake if she pretended not to hear him when he was so close to her ear? Chapter 6:14. Gu Mingming watched as Jiaoyu used his 2 little hands, which could barely reach his ears, to press his ears against his head. His clear big eyes shone innocently like a deer's as he looked at her. She smiled warmly and held Jiaoyu's little hands in her own. So warm. Tell me, after eavesdropping, what happened?" Jiaoyu looked as if he suddenly recalled something. His face lit up with excitement as he asked, "I heard Mummy and mother-in-law say that they are going to roast meat tonight. Is it the kind with a bonfire? Many people chatting and eating together, and listening to Mummy sing?" Gu Mingming shook her head gently and said, "No, it's just a few familiar friends eating together. Without a bonfire and many people, I will not go and sing." Jiaoyu hung his head low, his face full of disappointment. "Oh." Gu Mingming used her finger to gently lift Jiaoyu's little face and asked, "Why? You want a gathering with a bonfire, many people and singing?" Jiaoyu pursed his lips and nodded, saying, "I could have participated the previous time. It's all that strange snake's fault for abducting us halfway. I only saw Mother singing and dancing from afar, and I was so groggy that I couldn't hear clearly." Gu Mingming's heart tightened as she looked at Jiaoyu's disappointed face that looked like he was about to cry. Sweeping her gaze across, she saw Huda, Kamwu and even the unconscious Qixuan leaning against the door and peeking their little heads in. The other 2 little ones immediately shrank back when they saw Gu Mingming looking in their direction. After mumbling for a while, they lowered their heads and walked out to stand in front of Gu Mingming. "When the 4 of us were trapped in the underground prison, we talked about Mummy singing and dancing that day the most, and the fragrant roast meat. We all agreed that the next time there is a gathering, we must stick close to Mummy and watch her singing and dancing from a close distance, and eat lots and lots of fragrant roast meat. Mummy, do you think Qixuan will wake up if our wishes come true? He obviously wants to see Mom sing and dance the most." Huda carried the unconscious Qixuan in his arms. The 3 of them were with Qixuan every day and were like 4 conjoined babies wherever they went. The 3 brothers took turns to carry Qixuan in their arms. Other than Gu Mingming, no one else could snatch Qixuan away from them. Gu Mingming thought that perhaps this kidnapping incident had really traumatized her 3 sons. Looking at the 3 pairs of expectant little eyes, Gu Mingming did not have the courage to shake her head again. Taking a deep breath, Gu Mingming turned to Leah and said, "Let's make the arrangements. The whole tribe will gather today, and we will have a bonfire party at night." Leah smiled and asked, "What's the title?" "Reputation." Asking the whole clan to hold a bonfire party, there had to be something to celebrate. If she directly said, "My son wanted to see it, so I made one," although it was the truth, it was still not very good. Gu Mingming gently stroked her ears and said, "Celebrating the mating of the messenger of the beast deity and the snow fox tribe witch doctor, is this title enough?" Leah was taken aback, his gaze gentle. He pulled Gu Mingming and Qixuan into his arms and kissed Gu Mingming's lips, deep, lingering and unable to extricate himself. Chapter 6:15. That night, the bonfire lit up the night sky as the entire tribe celebrated. Elvis and Leah sat on either side of Gu Mingming, not even glancing at the rest of the people who came to celebrate. With the previous lesson, Barit and Oratin refused to leave Gu Mingming's side at all. The 2 steel-faced men just stood behind Elvis and Leah like bodyguards. Gu Mingming tried to persuade them a few times, but the 2 refused to loosen up. Helpless, Gu Mingming ignored them. The 3 young ones took turns carrying Qixuan and running around the bonfire party. They kept sharing with Qixuan how hot the fire was, how delicious the food was, how Mummy was going to sing soon. They kept sharing all the interesting news to Qixuan, hoping to wake him up. But even though Qixuan did not react at all, the three young ones were not discouraged at all. They carried Qixian and continued flying around. The snow foxes were in high spirits today, especially those females who had previously had conflicts with the females from Saint Nazaire. Their tails were raised to the sky. It was clearly written on their faces that see, who is the female that the mighty messenger has his eyes on. Sandy only wanted to reconcile with Gu Mengmeng, and did not care too much about it. It was just that Mandy and the other newly joined females had to suffer. They were originally the number one beauties of their respective tribes, but after just a few days in Saint Nazaire, they had to wander from place to place with the rest of the tribe. They had to go through migrations and battles, living their lives in fear. It was not easy for them to settle down temporarily, but they still had to fight with these foxes. Gu Mingming saw it all, but she could not bring herself to care. The affairs of the women were a mess. Once they stepped into it, they could forget about getting out of it. If they wanted to make a fuss, let them. Anyway, they would not be able to do anything. As long as it did not harm their foundation, Gu Mingming could not be bothered. Wabi walked in front of Gu Mingming and looked at Elvis coldly, then at Leah. Then he kicked Elvis. Go to one side. Elvis frowned. The moment he looked up, his murderous aura had already leaked out. Wabi gave a condescending smile. Elvis's muscles instantly swelled up. Gu Mingming's emotions had made him feel vexed for the past few days, but he did not dare to show it in front of Gu Mingming. A snake beast at the peak of the 5th level, right? It was a good time to have a good fight. Gu Mingming looked at the two of them in a flash and said softly, "Are you two planning to tear Sauter apart?" A battle between level 5 orcs was not the same as when Nina and her partner bullied Sandy in the past. It would be considered a big scene if a few of them fought until their scalps bled. If Wabi and Elvis were to fight, there would be no need for the campfire party. Chapter 6:16. After Elvis and Leah left, Wabi took out a fruit from his bosom. It was bright red and looked especially alluring. Gu Mingming's eyes welled up. She stared at the fruit for a long time but didn't reach for it. Wabi just held the fruit and looked to the side. He wanted to pluck this for you the last time, but I plucked the wrong one. Gu Mingming remembered that day when Wabi roared at Snake, "If your female wants to eat it, why don't you pluck it yourself?" In the end, he even tried to please Snake and was kicked onto a tree branch by Snake. Wabi saw that Gu Mingming didn't reach for it after a long time, and was rather impatient. He directly stuffed the fruit into Gu Mingming's hands and said, "This time you didn't pluck the wrong one. It's the one at the top and the best and biggest one. Hurry and eat it." Gu Mingming held up the fruit and bit into it in a daze. The juice spread to every one of her taste buds. It was obviously very sweet, but Gu Mingming felt like she was chewing wax. She frowned but tried her best to smile. "Yeah, he has always had good taste. It tastes really good." Wabi turned his head again, and didn't look at Gu Mingming. He just said coldly, "I will be heading back to the Snake King Valley in a while. I will guard the place he used to stay." Gu Mingming nodded. "Yeah." Wabi took a deep breath and continued, "Gu Mingming, you guard it." Gu Mingming looked up at Wabi. "Guard what?" Wabi kept his head turned and refused to look at Gu Mingming. "Guard yourself. Don't get hurt, don't get sick, don't get sad, and definitely don't die." Gu Mingming was stunned. She didn't understand what Wabi meant. Wabi said, "He once roamed the entire beast world and finally stayed at the Snake King Valley. I think that is the place he likes." Gu Mingming searched through Snake's memories, but couldn't figure out how he liked the Snake King Valley. She only knew that he was used to that place, and had not come out for 1,000 years. But if he didn't like it, how could he get used to it? With that thought, Gu Mingming nodded and agreed with Wabi's words. But Wabi's expression dimmed. But in order to guard you, he abandoned the entire Snake King Valley without hesitation. So, the one he likes the most is you. Gu Mingming's hand trembled as she held onto the fruit. She took a bite and pretended that she was busy, so she did not answer Wabi. Wabi did not seem to be anticipating Gu Mingming's reply as he continued, "I will protect the Snake King Valley that he abandoned." He wanted to protect Gu Mingming. "You will protect her for him. If you dare to hurt yourself in the slightest, I will definitely not let you off." With that, Wuxia ignored Gu Mingming's reaction and directly stood up to leave without looking back. It wasn't that he didn't want to turn around, but he was afraid that when he turned around, he would discover that the familiar pressure didn't come from someone he was familiar with. Chapter 617. Gu Mingming did not have much of a reaction, because from the reactions of Elvis and Leah after she told Sandy about this story, there were probably quite a number of people in this world who believed in Wuxia. Now that her reputation as the messenger of the beast deity was growing by the day, it was not a new plot for someone to impersonate her old lover. If it was in the past, Gu Mingming would have laughed like a pig, or even choked on her own saliva. But now she just said calmly, "Chase him away, I don't want to see him. He was just a swindler." What was there to see? But in Elvis and Lee's eyes, her blandness had changed. Leah pursed his lips and exchanged glances with Elvis. In just a breath's time, they had already gone through 800 rounds of battle in their eyes. On one hand, this Wuxia had memories with Gu Mingming that both of them did not have. Even Lee's, "I prefer to hear you confess to me rather than apologize," was derived from this male. In Gu Mingming's words, that was her first love. With the return of this male, Elvis and Lee's position would be in jeopardy. On the other hand, Gu Mingming did not even want to see him, which meant that she was still angry. If he didn't mind it anymore, why would he still be angry? Gu Mingming had been in low spirits during this period of time. The two of them had tried everything they could but could not share her worries. Perhaps Wuxia could? In the end, the two of them reached an agreement. Gu Mingming was the most important. As long as it could make her feel better, no matter how painful it was, they could endure it. So Leah waved his tail and laid on Gu Mingming's knee. He looked at Gu Mingming with his handsome face and asked, "Why not? Didn't you say, those who pass through the door are guests?" Gu Mingming did not see Elvis and Leah exchanging glances above her head just now, so she did not know that the holes in their brains had already reached the ends of the earth. Thus she just said calmly, "He's just a liar, what's there to see?" Liar. Didn't Wuxia lie to her back then? If not, why would she be picked up by Elvis alone in the lake? Biting his lower lip, Leah held back his jealousy and said, "He lied to my Mingming's people, how can we let him off so easily? I want to meet him." Gu Mingming looked at Leah in confusion, and did not say a word. Elvis held on to Gu Mingming's shoulders and pulled her into his embrace. He kissed her hair and said, "We know what to do, don't worry." "Why should I be at ease?" Gu Mingming could not understand. Elvis said, "Bring him in." Gu Mingming looked at the jealousy in their eyes. She did not understand at first, but now she understood. Forget it, let them be. His emotions must have put a lot of pressure on the two of them recently. It was good to have someone come to their door to relieve their anger. So Gu Mingming nodded, and the snow fox who delivered the letter turned and ran off, probably to bring the person in. Gu Mingming, who was originally lacking in interest, could not help but be curious. What would the first person to impersonate Wuxia look like? Chapter 618. Gu Mingming did not know that ever since she inherited Snake's ability, her entire temperament had undergone a huge change. She clearly had a Lolita face, but her entire body was emitting a gloomy aura. She leaned lazily against Elvis's chest, smiling faintly at the males who were approaching her step by step. She did not appear to be perfunctory, but exuded a king's disdain that enveloped everyone. That was Snake's innate temperament, which could not be learned. Gu Mingming, as the heir, could at most unleash 80% of it, but it was enough to shock the world. Her gaze was filled with judgment and disdain, as if she was the king of hell, looking coldly at stupid humans. But that round and plump little face gave people a sense of confusion. The most innocent face had the most terrifying gaze. This contrast made people feel an indescribable strangeness, but also an indescribable harmony. Wuxia had obvious wounds on his body. The most fatal one was an open wound on his chest that stretched from his right shoulder to his left lower abdomen. His flesh was exposed, and although the blood had stopped flowing, it still looked extremely hideous. There were countless other small wounds of different lengths. Some were so deep that the bone could be seen. It was as if a large piece of flesh had been bitten off on his leg. Every step he took was painful but tough, and he had imitated the temperament of an iron-blooded Special Forces soldier very well. Gu Mingming's expression did not change at all, but Elvis and Leah looked at each other. They looked at Gu Mingming carefully, probably calculating. With such injuries, would Gu Mingming's heart ache? Then should they teach him a lesson now? Or should they immediately bring him to be treated? That person stood beside the bonfire, as if he was not afraid of the blazing flames. But Gu Mingming could not only see the surface of a person, she could even easily see through a person's emotions, especially fear. Perhaps it was because the people who had appeared in front of Snake in the past 1,000 years had vividly portrayed all the types of fear in the world. So as long as you were afraid, Gu Mingming could see through any minute details at a glance. Fear of fire. That was normal before she appeared. The beast world had not seen fire for hundreds of years. Even the people from Saint Nazaire and Sauter took half a year to get used to the flames. This Wuxia was pretty good. To be able to show off to this extent, and to show that he wasn't afraid, he even purposely stood by the fire. He had some guts. Ayun, I'm sorry I'm late. Wuxia stared at Gu Mingming affectionately, not avoiding her cold gaze and sizing her up. Leah tightened his grip, feeling as if his heart was being clutched. Ayun? So Kong Moyan was her real name? Gu Mingming was a fake name? Gu Mingming smiled helplessly as she felt the tension radiating from her hands and shoulders. Just how insecure were these two fellows? They had already become partners, so why would they be swayed by the words of a liar? Gu Mingming returned Li's hand without batting an eyelid. She inched her head closer to Elvis's chest, using the smallest physical action to appease her two males. Then she opened her mouth and said only 2 words, purpose. Wuxia was stunned. A hint of panic flashed across his face. Although it was only for a moment, it did not escape Elvis's and Li's guarded gaze that was staring at him. Chapter 619. Gu Mingming retracted her hand from Li's and slowly closed her eyes. She mumbled one word as if she was sleep-talking and did not say another word. Leah understood that she was handing this liar over to him to deal with. So he swayed his tail, stood up and walked down. He circled around Wuxia twice before asking, "Wolf beast?" Wuxia nodded. Leah placed a hand on his shoulder and patted him twice before asking again, "Third level?" Wuxia nodded again. Leah shrugged his shoulders and swayed his tail as he walked back. He still said one word, liar. Wuxia was taken aback. He took a step forward and said, "I did not lie, I am Wuxia." Leah glanced sideways at him and said, "Wuxia is indeed 3rd level, but Gu Mingming said that he is from the White Tiger Troop. Do you know what a white tiger looks like? Oriton, come over and let him see what a white tiger looks like." With that, Oriton, who had been guarding behind Gu Mingming, took a few steps forward and stood beside Leah, looking at Wuxia face to face. When two people of similar height stood together, the aura of Wuxia was instantly suppressed by Oriton. Oriton was one of the best among the 3rd-level beasts. Other than Elvis, he had never submitted to anyone else. Although there was a 5th-level Elvis and a Beast King-level Gu Mingming sitting in the hall. Other than these two strange creatures, in the entire beast world, the peak of 3rd level was already a very powerful existence. After all, most orcs did not have the chance to mate, so 3rd level was a huge hurdle. And there were many orcs who could not even step into the 3rd level realm in their entire lives. So not to mention a mere imposter, even if it was Leah. Oriton was not afraid. He swayed his neck left and right as a warm-up. This small action was learned by him subconsciously imitating Elvis. It gradually became a habit and could not be changed. I am here to look for Ayun, not to fight. Wuxia had long heard of Oriton's reputation. Looking at that pair of fierce eyes, he felt really pressured. Oriton was expressionless as he said coldly, "If you can't even beat me, what right do you have to speak to the great messenger?" As soon as he finished speaking, Oriton roared and charged towards Wuxia. Phrases such as the opponent being injured and having an unfair advantage were worthless in the beast world. Who is to blame if you're injured? If you can't even protect yourself, it's because you're incompetent. Who should accommodate you because you're useless? Sorry, there was no such logic in the beast world. Wuxia was a level 3 orc after all. Even though his condition was not as good as Oratin's, it was not to the extent of Oratin's one-sided abuse. He dodged, and could occasionally strike back at Oratin. After fighting for a while, there was only a small scratch on Oratin's arm, but Uxia was in such a sorry state that it was almost unbearable to look at. Leah stared at Gu Mingming's expression from beginning to end, and could not find any trace of heartache, so he was even more certain that she was a liar. But this liar came at the right time. He could relieve everyone's frustrations. So Leah stood up slowly and said softly, "It's all right, no matter if you're real or fake, as long as you can walk in front of Gu Mingming, I'll admit that you're Uxia." Chapter 620. Elvis also slowly stood up from Gu Mingming's side. He took 2 steps forward and stood half a step behind Leah. He staggered his upper body and completely blocked Uxia from Gu Mingming's line of sight. Ian flew out of nowhere and circled twice in the air. Then he spread his wings and flew in midair like a half-orc, looking down at Uxia from above. It was not an exaggeration to say that Uxia felt that there was an impassable iron wall in front of him. It was a high wall that gave off a strong sense of oppression, and made it difficult for one to breathe. Walk over? Haha, stop joking. He had no doubt that when he walked past these people and reached Gu Mingming, not even his bones would be left. Every cell in his body was afraid. Uxia could not help but take a step back and said, I'll go. I'll go, all right. Oakley stood behind Uxia, leading a group of tribesmen as the acting witch doctor. Among them, there was also the Snow Fox Elder who was at odds with him previously. They lined up in a row, and behind them was a majestic group of beasts. In the dark night, pairs of bloodthirsty and dangerous eyes reflected sparks of fire, giving off an intimidating aura. Oakley laughed softly and asked, "Where do you think this is? That you can come and go as you please?" The Snow Fox Elder had an unfriendly expression, and a pair of wise eyes shone with coldness. He looked at Uxia and said, "You have already offended the mighty beast deity by pretending to be the messenger and disrupting the celebration party of the messenger and the 9th highness of the Snow Fox tribe. As the elders of the messenger tribe, we cannot let you leave so easily." Uxia was really panicking. He originally thought that his looks matched Gu Mingming's description of Uxia, so he came with the mentality of giving it a try. He thought that since he matched Gu Mingming's description in every aspect, maybe she would like him when she sees him? Males, as long as they were pleasing to the eye, they could just accept them. As for whether he was the real Uxia, who would care? He did not want to make things so big. Uxia was extremely flustered. There was a wall in front, a pack of wolves behind, and a huge bird flying above his head. There's no escape. What followed was a live broadcast of a group fight. Yes, a group fight. A group of people, beating up Uxia. Elvis and the rest did not have a chance to attack as Oratin and Barit returned to Gu Mingming's side. Elvis hugged Gu Mingming back into his arms while Leah laid on Gu Mingming's knees, wagging his tail in boredom. Ian circled around twice before disappearing into the darkness again. A group of people around the bonfire were violently kicking Uxia. "All right." After a long while, Gu Mingming said softly, saving Uxia's life. Leah looked up with a puzzled expression. With a slightly sour tone he asked, "Your heart aches?" Gu Mingming did not answer Lee's question. She just sat at her original spot and looked disdainfully at Uxia, who was beaten to the point that he was on his last breath. She asked, "Tell me who sent you here?" Uxia was twitching as he laid on the ground. When he came, he got a body full of injuries in order to portray his character. This time, he did not need to portray his injuries anymore as they were more realistic than before. Hearing Gu Mingming's question, he shook his head blankly and said, No one sent me." Chapter 621. Uxia was stunned, shook his head and said, No, it was a crippled beast who taught me." Crippled beast. Cole. The smile on Gu Mingming's face turned colder, and her gaze was filled with venom. Her voice was calm and cold, and it was hard to tell if she was happy or angry. She just asked, "Where is he?" Uxia was stunned. Then he shook his head and said, "I don't know. He just happened to pass by our tribe and met me." Then he told me that I looked especially like an old lover of the great messenger. Then he told me that if I used the name Yuxia to see you, you would definitely like me. That way, I could become the male of the great messenger. Even if you don't like me, you'll still let me stay in the messenger's tribe on account of my resemblance to that person. Our tribe was too weak in the past, and all the capable males had gone to better tribes to develop, leaving behind only the old and weak. Every year, when winter comes, there would be waves and waves of stray beasts coming to snatch our food. If we don't leave now, we will all be forced to death. Gu Mengmeng quietly looked at the male who was beaten until his face was swollen, and could not even stand up. She slowly spoke for him. So you escaped and want to seek refuge with me? Yuxia firmly nodded his head and replied, yes. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and asked him back, why do you think I will accept a deserter who abandoned his tribe? Yuxia was startled for a moment, then shook his head and said, I am not a deserter. Gu Mengmeng leaned back, her two thick tails pressing against her waist like a luxurious sofa backrest, allowing her to borrow strength to sit more comfortably. Gu Mengmeng looked at Yuxia nonchalantly. Oh? He coughed. Yuxia was a little emotional as he said, I came to seek refuge with the great messenger so that Saint Nazir can accept my people. Gu Mengmeng gave a teasing smile and said, honey trap? Yuxia stood rooted to the ground, not knowing how to respond. What honey trap? He did not understand at all. Gu Mengmeng leaned forward with her elbows on her knees, and the back of her hand supporting her chin. She sized up Yuxia, who did not have an inch of good flesh on his body, and asked with a smile, as long as I am willing to accept your people into Saint Nazir and become my beast pet, are you willing too? The male nodded without hesitation and said, beast pet, guardian beast, or even food, I am willing. But Leah burst out laughing. He glanced sideways at Yuxia and said, even if you are willing, you have to see if our Mengmeng is willing. You have to be at least as good as me to be a beast pet. Look at your battered appearance. Who would like it? Gu Mengmeng sat at the same spot, and did not comment on Li's words. She just said, you said it yourself, the tribe is only left with the old, weak and sick. They will only be a burden if they join Saint Nazir. Why should I find trouble for my own tribe? Yuan said, Eugene, if not everyone please. Eugene, although they are only half-orcs, but... Gu Mengmeng stood up and made a gesture. The 16 valued females from the previous beauty pageant, as well as Sauter's original female snow foxes, all walked in front of Gu Mengmeng in unison. It was really a riot of colors. The most important thing was, they were all perfect females. Gu Mengmeng stood in the middle of a large group of females. Even though they were of the same gender, it gave people the illusion that Gu Mengmeng was overbearing and aggressive, lying in the midst of flowers. Using 4 words to sum it up perfectly, invincible East. Aside, Chapter 622. The light in Yuxia's eyes completely dimmed. The most ideal situation would be for him to become Gu Mengmeng's male and receive her love, so that he could take care of his tribesmen. The next best thing would be for Gu Mengmeng to keep 2 half-orc females, so that even if the males could not survive the winter, they could die with no regrets. But now, his face was swollen and bruised, and looking at the males standing beside the messenger. Was this how it felt to feel inferior? As for females, if it was any other tribe, even a half-orc female would definitely be accepted. But, the messenger's tribe did not seem to lack females at all. Gu Mengmeng passed through the crowd and walked step by step to Yuxia. She squatted down and said in a calm voice, without any emotions, your bargaining chip is not worth mentioning in my eyes. If you want to discuss terms with me, at least show some sincerity. Yuxia did not understand and just stared blankly at Gu Mengmeng. He did not know why, but he just felt that Gu Mengmeng was giving him a chance. After thinking for a while, he said, as long as the mighty messenger is willing to accept my tribesmen, I can do anything you want me to. Anything. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and said, tell me the situation you saw that person from start to end. Don't leave out a single word. Yuxia frowned and thought carefully before starting to narrate. More than 10 days ago, there were stray beasts attacking our tribe. It was him who suddenly appeared and helped us defeat the stray beasts. We begged him to stay in our tribe. Although he was a crippled beast, he was still a 5th-level orc. With him, we would not have to be afraid of stray beasts attacking our tribe again. But he looked very sad and just looked into the distance, saying calmly, "If I stay, it will be the real danger." Then he suddenly looked at me and did not speak. After staring for a long time until I got goosebumps, he then opened his mouth and said that I looked like the messenger's old love. If I wanted to save the tribe, I could only rely on Saint Nazir. Then I came. Thinking about it, he was really rash. With just a few words from a person whose name he didn't even know, he actually brought his clansmen to this place after a long journey. Gu Mingming laughed coldly. Stray beasts attacked the tribe, and he just so happened to appear and save the tribe? Cole did not look like a fox with a Lei Feng personality. Moreover, his mating mark had already been washed away by Gu Mingming. He was a stray beast himself. Why would he help the tribe fight against the stray beasts? Could it be that he had directed and acted on his own from start to finish? Gu Mingming smiled sinisterly, but she did not tell Yu Sijin her inner thoughts. She just said coldly, "Didn't he say anything else?" Yu Sijin frowned, thought carefully for a long time and said, "Oh, there is." He had even said something very strange such as, "If a counterfeit that is closer to the original appears, how long will you be favored?" That was the case. I didn't know what he was talking about. When I asked him again, he just smiled and said, "I'm just talking to myself." So I didn't take it to heart. Counterfeit? Gu Mingming turned back and saw that Leah was indeed unable to hold back his smile. He even knew about Lee's habit of imitating Yu Sijin to please him, and he even spent so much effort to find an imitation that looked more like Yu Sijin, just to suppress Leah. Chapter 623. Yu Sijin could not keep up with Gu Mingming's pace and just laid on the ground, looking up at Gu Mingming as she walked back to Elvis and Lee's side step by step. She sat down and returned to her original embrace, one black and one white tail swaying lightly on her left and right. The snow fox laid on her knees, looking enchanting and affectionate. The group of females laughed and laughed as they dispersed. The people behind them who were originally aggressive also retracted their murderous aura and scattered in all directions. It was as if the tension from before had never happened. After being stunned for a long time, he finally regained his senses. He and his clansmen could really stay in Saint Nazir. He could really become a member of the messenger's tribe. Struggling to stand up, Yu Sijin took a step forward and was stopped by Oriton. He did not say anything and only looked at Yu Sijin expressionlessly. They were both level 3 orcs, but Yu Sijin knew very well that he was no match for Oriton. Moreover, he had no intention of causing trouble. He only wanted to express his gratitude. So he shouted at Gu Mingming, "Burke." Gu Mingming looked at him from the corner of her eyes, not saying a word. Yu Sijin shouted again, "My name is Berg. From today onwards, my life belongs to Lord Emissary, and I'm at your disposal." Gu Mingming looked away and ignored him. She didn't need anyone else to put their lives in her hands. She no longer had the strength to bear another millennium. As she retracted her gaze, she saw Oriton handing Burke over to one of the elders and officially conveyed Gu Mingming's orders as the guardian of the messengers to temporarily settle the Burke tribesmen in Sauter and bring them along when Gu Mingming returned to Saint Nazir. Leah slowly straightened his body and wiped away the playful expression on his face. He looked at Gu Mingming and asked, "You clearly know who instigated him to come and you still accepted him?" Gu Mingming chuckled. "The beast deity told me to maintain a kind heart. He said that this is the only way for me to find a way to save Hada." Leah remained silent. Hada's matter was a thorn in Gu Mingming's heart. As long as that little wolf cub did not wake up, Gu Mingming would be forced to take on all of Cole's tricks. He sighed and said, "I'll send someone to keep an eye on him." Gu Mingming chuckled. "Afraid that he will be another Ellie?" Leah nodded in acknowledgement. But Gu Mingming shook her head and said, "There's no need. A person who is willing to sacrifice himself for the tribe will not place his own tribe in a dangerous situation just for Cole's goal." Elvis's voice was slightly cold. "You believe him?" Gu Mingming nodded. She did not know if it was because of Snake, But she could now easily discern the subtle emotions of others, especially lies and fear. Elvis sighed and said, because he really looks like, you see Jean, isn't that right? Gu Mingming chuckled. She glanced sideways at Elvis and then at Leah. Do the two of you still think that you see Jean really exists? Elvis remained silent and Leah nodded. Gu Mingming was helpless, but she could not be bothered to explain further. She just said, pass down the order. In the future, if anyone claims to be UC Jean, there's no need to ask for permission. Just beat him away. Elvis frowned and his gaze darkened. I actually hope that he really finds his way here. I will fulfill my promise and stay by your side. Gu Mingming was a little surprised and looked at Elvis in confusion. Chapter 624. Gu Mingming's heart clenched. Had her emotions reached such a stage that Elvis and Leah could not do anything about it? Actually, it was really nothing much. She just did not have much interest in anything and was not too upset even if she could not be happy. Snake's matter. She had already gotten over it. Or perhaps it was the feelings Snake had felt when he saved her that combined with her guilt. With the beast deities and Wabiai's guidance and reminders, she was no longer that upset. She was just not happy or angry. But it seemed to have made those two fellows very worried. The corners of Gu Mingming's mouth twitched as she forced a smile. She looked at Elvis and said, I am really fine. I will slowly get better after a few days of getting used to this 1,000-year soul. Don't worry, all right? Elvis sighed softly, then hugged Gu Mingming even tighter. His faint and hoarse voice rang above Gu Mingming's head. I'm afraid the only thing I can't learn in this lifetime is not to worry about you. Gu Mingming did not say anything else and just quietly allowed Elvis to hug her. The three little ones were drenched in sweat from running and suddenly pounced into Gu Mingming's arms. Although Gu Mingming would not be pushed down by them now, Leah and Elvis still instinctively tried to stop them. But these three little ones were too agile. They made use of their bodies to make use of the time difference and directly bypassed Elvis and Leah from 3 different angles. They ran to Gu Mingming's side with their buttocks wobbling. Mummy, when are you going to sing? Jiaoyu carried Qixuan in his arms as he looked up at Gu Mingming and asked. Huda lay at Gu Mingming's feet, his big bright eyes filled with anticipation. But he pursed his lips and did not say anything. Kanwu occupied the most advantageous position and hung his whole body in Gu Mingming's arms. He looked up at Gu Mingming and followed Jiaoyu's words. Yes, yes, Mummy, when are you going to sing? Gu Mingming rubbed Kanwu's little head and kissed Huda and Jiaoyu. Finally, she carried Qixuan in her arms and said, let's go and sing now. The 3 children's eyes lit up. Kanwu gave Gu Mingming's embrace to Qixuan and followed closely behind her. He asked, Mummy, can we follow you? Gu Mingming smiled and nodded. Of course, I'll give you VIP seats. Jiaoyu. What is a VIP seat? Gu Mingming brought the 4 children and walked towards the bonfire, saying, very important people. It means a very important person. Kanwu sniggered and turned back to glance at Elvis, clearly provoking him. He went forward and hugged Gu Mingming's shoulders. At the same time, he accidentally kicked Kanwu to the side. He only looked at Gu Mingming's side profile and asked, are Leah and I VIPs too? Gu Mingming's face turned red. In the past, Gu Mingming could not notice Elvis and Kanwu's little tricks, but now, she could see it very clearly. Chuckling lightly, he said, the VIP seats are limited. If you want to sit, carry Kanwu. The 2 of you can count as 1 seat. Elvis frowned and lowered his head to look at Kanwu. Both father and son had a tacit understanding and spoke at the same time. No. No. Gu Mingming chuckled. Oh, you really have telepathy. Chapter 625. Kanwu jumped into Lee's arms and said, I will sit with Daddy Leah. Gu Mingming shook her head. Kanwu was clearly the most like Elvis, but Elvis just had the worst relationship with him. Huda pursed his lips. He also wanted someone to carry him, but why was there no place for him? Gu Mingming lowered her head and hugged Qixuan with one arm. She opened her other arm and looked at Huda, saying, Come, let Mummy carry you. Huda looked up and smiled. He shook his head and said, I am the elder brother, I can walk by myself. He was satisfied that he was not neglected. Mummy was already having a hard time. He could not be her burden. Gu Mingming rubbed Huda's little head and bent down to carry him up. She kissed his little face and said, "You are the elder brother of the three of them, but also my son." The moment she finished speaking, Gu Mingming's arms felt lighter. Elvis took over Huda and Qixian was carried by Leah. Leah had always been on good terms with the children, so it was not strange that he would carry them. But Elvis, who had never carried anyone other than Jiaoyu, was now willing to carry Huda in his arms. This made Gu Mingming rather surprised. Elvis cleared his throat and said, "Your males are still alive. There is no reason for you to suffer." Gu Mingming chuckled and said, "It's just carrying two sons. They are not that heavy." Elvis stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Gu Mingming. His blue eyes were filled with seriousness as he said word by word, "No matter how heavy it is, I should be the one to carry it." Gu Mingming did not argue any further because she knew that Elvis and Leah were already panicking enough. They desperately wanted to do something for her to make her feel better, and all she could do was to cooperate. Nodding, Gu Mingming had already walked to the side of the bonfire. The drum used for Colin's proposal was left in St. Nazaire, but Leah rushed to make a new one after knowing that Gu Mingming was going to hold a bonfire party and had promised the children to sing. It was basically the same as the first version, but there were some improvements on the details, making it look much more exquisite than the one in St. Nazaire. Gu Mingming held the drumstick and hammered on the drum, producing a deep and resonant sound. With that hammering, only the crackling sound of the burning wood could be heard in the entire square. Everyone looked at Gu Mingming in unison. Gu Mingming took a deep breath and flipped onto the drum. She sat sideways lazily with one foot on the edge of the drum and the other hanging down casually. She held the drumstick in her hands and hit the drum rhythmically, each beat more concentrated than the one before. After the last beat, Gu Mingming slowly opened her mouth to sing, "Aliens." As only a few races in the beast world knew how to sing, this song Alien had become Gu Mingming's masterpiece. Every time the tribesmen heard it, their blood would boil. Following Colin's roar, the scene was so heated that it almost went out of control. Gu Mingming instinctively turned to look at Qixian. He was still sleeping quietly. Smiling bitterly, Gu Mingming looked down in disappointment. She also knew that Qixian was poisoned by coal. How could one song wake him up? She had only agreed to Huda's request because she could tell that the children were thinking of ways to make her happy. She could not bear to reject the children's kind intentions, but in the end, she was still delusional. What if Qixian could really wake up from a song? That would be the greatest mercy from the heavens. Chapter 626. The night campfire party lasted for a long time. To be precise, it was a night of revelry for the Snow Fox tribe. After 1,000 years, the Snow Fox tribe finally became the closest tribe to the messenger of the beast deity. The worries that had been in turmoil for 1,000 years gradually disappeared along with the mark on Gu Mingming's left ear. In the following days, Leah became very busy. Gu Mingming intentionally handed solder over to Oakley to manage. After all, in the 1 month that Gu Mingming was in the Snake King Valley, Oakley managed the tribe well despite the estrangement between the two tribes. So Lee's main task for this period was to bring Oakley along to handle some tribe matters and teach him how to balance the relationship between power and benefits. After Leah and Gu Mingming became partners, the Snow Fox tribe became more peaceful. In Lee's words, they made a ruckus previously because they were too uneasy and afraid that Gu Mingming would abandon them. So they desperately wanted to prove that they were stronger than the people of St. Nazaire. This kind of situation was very common. It was the legendary saying that the more lacking something, the more they would flaunt it. But now that Leah and Gu Mingming's relationship had been confirmed, and Gu Mingming had told the elders that they were a family, the pride and nobility that had been ingrained into the Snow Fox tribe's bones for 1,000 years had gradually awakened, becoming the best framework to restrain them. There was no need to worry too much about restraining them, just a light sentence. Don't forget you are from the Snow Fox tribe. It was easy for the elder and those troublesome females to settle down. The rain came suddenly. Gu Mingming had never seen such a majestic aura that could destroy everything in the modern world. Sitting at the entrance of the stone house, Gu Mingming reached out one hand to catch the rainwater falling from the sky. Gu Mingming frowned slightly as she watched the bean-sized raindrops land on her hand. It actually hurt a little from being smashed. If it was him, perhaps he would be happy? After all, he loved rainy days the most. A piece of beast skin was draped over her. Gu Mingming didn't turn back, and just leaned into the familiar embrace. This rain will last for at least 10 days. The food reserves at home might not be enough, so I need to go out for a while. Elvis's gentle voice rang from above her head. There were quite a lot of people in this house now. Elvis and Lee's appetites had always been huge, and they would usually come back after eating their fill while hunting. Accompanying Gu Mingming to eat was just to enjoy the feeling of eating with her. After Hutta and his brothers evolved, their appetites had obviously increased. The three of them could eat almost an entire wild beast in one meal. After inheriting Snake's powers, Gu Mingming's appetite had obviously increased. A family would need about 5 wild beasts a day. The food reserves at home were indeed not enough. Gu Mingming stood up slowly and stuffed the beast's skin back into Elvis's arms. Then she looked at the rain and said, "I'll go. This kind of weather is more suitable for me than anyone else." Gu Mingming had just taken her first step, and before her heel could even touch the ground, the back of her hand was pulled back by someone, and she fell back into Elvis's chest. Hug. Elvis draped the beast skin hood over Gu Mingming's body, then hugged her whole body in his arms. After staying silent for a while, he said, "My female should be pampered. As long as I'm alive, there won't be any weather suitable for you to travel around. Understand?" Chapter 627. Elvis frowned and said, "You can't get drenched in the rain. Water will enter your brain." Gu Mingming was taken aback for a moment before she burst out laughing. She remembered that this was what she used to tease Elvis and Leah. That time when they were digging bamboo shoots in the bamboo forest. Ian was also present, and the three males even shook their heads with a straight face, saying things like, "I won't die anyway, it shouldn't be serious." He actually took it seriously, and even remembered it till now. Elvis did not know what was so funny about this sentence, but it was the biggest smile Gu Mingming had seen ever since she returned from the Snake King Valley. It was rare to see her face so radiant, and Elvis felt as if spring had bloomed in his heart, and the sun was shining brightly in her smile. Elvis's large hand cupped Gu Mingming's little face, and through the gaps between his fingers, her gaze was clear and calm. A faint smile was already extremely precious to Elvis, and he was suddenly so afraid of losing this smile. He even thought, so what if he got drenched in the rain, as long as she was happy? Even if he had to drown in the rain with her, he was willing. For some strange reason, Elvis actually nodded and said, "Don't run around. You must always stay within my sight." Gu Mingming knew that Elvis had agreed. In the past, she would always act cute and throw a tantrum whenever she asked him to do something, but as long as it was something bad for her body, he would never back down. But now, just a smile was enough to make him compromise. She must have done something wrong in the end, otherwise why would he become more and more humble after mating for more than half a year and having 4 children? Gu Mingming wrapped her arms around Elvis's arm and leaned against his shoulder. She nodded and said, "All right, I will stick to you like this." Her heart felt as if it was being ruthlessly tugged at by something. Elvis lowered his head and kissed Gu Mingming's hair. He smiled and did not say a word, only using the beast's skin to wrap her up more tightly. Then he carried her up and strode into the rain. The raindrops landed on the beast's skin, giving off a concentrated thud sound. The beast's skin had a certain waterproof function, and the raindrops slid down the fur on the beast's skin, not drenching Gu Mingming at all. Gu Mingming wrapped her little arms around Elvis's neck and stretched out an arm behind him to catch the raindrops falling from the sky. It still hurts as much as before, but this feeling doesn't seem too bad. Elvis quickly brought Gu Mingming into the heart of the forest. With a few leaps, he placed Gu Mingming in a relatively open area. He tidied up the beast's skin and reminded her, "Don't run around, understand?" Gu Mingming nodded and gave Elvis a reassuring smile. Elvis transformed into a wolf and charged into the depths of the misty rain. He wanted to end the battle quickly and not let Gu Mingming wait for too long. Gu Mingming sat in the rain, hugging her knees. She lifted her face slightly and squinted her eyes, allowing the rain to hit her face. Why do snakes like rainy days? The rain was clearly very painful when it hit the body. A person slowly approached Gu Mengmeng. The rain fell to the ground and rose up again. Mist filled the air, and even with Gu Mengmeng's eyesight, she could not see that person's face clearly. The smell was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't remember whose smell it was. Step by step, when Gu Mengmeng saw clearly the person carrying the prey, the emotions on her face had completely disappeared. "It's you?" Gu Mengmeng asked gently. Chapter 628. Gu Mengmeng sized up Burke, who was standing beside her, and using his prey to shield her from the rain. "What are you doing?" Burke carried his prey on his shoulders. In order to shield Gu Mengmeng from the rain as much as possible, he stood against the wind. The rain hit him from behind, but he stood there resolutely without moving an inch. He replied, "I met Elvis on my way back. Are you waiting for him?" Gu Mengmeng looked at Burke. Gu Mengmeng did not reply. She just quietly lowered her head to look at the raindrops falling into the puddle beside her feet. Drop by drop, ripples spread out in circles, but it did not form a circle before it was smashed by another drop of rain. Burke didn't mind and continued, "I came out to hunt for the elders in the tribe. You said before, if we stay, we must be self-sufficient and not be a burden to the tribe." Gu Mengmeng still didn't reply. After the incident with Snake, Gu Mengmeng clearly knew that if you don't want to give others a chance right from the start, then keep your kindness and easygoing. Don't give others hope and let them misunderstand. Burke acted as if he couldn't see Gu Mengmeng's rejection. "I, Burke, am a man of my words. You protected our entire tribe. My life is yours." Gu Mengmeng saw that Burke had no intention of stopping. She glanced at him and said coldly, "Your life has no value to me, so you can keep it for yourself. I don't want it. Also, you are disturbing me from watching the rain. So please leave and stop bothering me." Burke was stunned for 2 seconds. His expression froze. He then lowered his head and said, "I will accompany you until Elvis returns. After all, this is the wilderness. It's not safe for you to be alone." The rain was still pouring. The surroundings were misty and cold, but it made Gu Mengmeng feel very comfortable. Gu Mengmeng laughed softly. "Do you think in the entire beast world anyone can hurt me?" The beast pressure slowly seeping out made Burke's legs wobble. He frowned and clenched his teeth, unwilling to leave. Gu Mengmeng retracted her beast pressure and looked at him calmly. "I won't accept you, so don't bother trying to please me. There are many females in the tribe. Your chances of success will be higher if you change your target." Even though it was raining cats and dogs, Borg could clearly feel a layer of cold sweat forming on his body. The coldness in his bones was even colder than the rain. Gu Mengmeng did have the ability to protect herself. She did not need him. But Burke still shook his head resolutely. "I will stay with Elvis until he returns. Once he returns, I will leave." Gu Mengmeng frowned and said, I don't need your company." Borg stubbornly insisted, "If you don't need company, then don't put on such a lonely expression. It's so heartbreaking." Burke's voice was not loud. If not for Gu Mengmeng's amazing hearing, she might not have heard him through the sound of the rain. After being stunned for a moment, Gu Mengmeng slowly stood up and said, "If you are not leaving, I will." Burke watched as Gu Mengmeng walked into the rain at a steady pace. He was in a daze until she completely disappeared in the rain. He then lowered his head slowly and murmured, "I just want to accompany you." Gu Mengmeng walked into the forest and accurately located Elvis's direction. Chapter 629. Seeing Gu Mengmeng, Elvis was momentarily stunned. Throwing the dead beast aside, he transformed into his human form and walked to Gu Mengmeng. His long black hair stuck to his body and his muscles were defined and defined. The faint smell of blood accentuated his elegance as he stood in the rain, as if he was a mandala flower blooming in hell. "Why are you here?" Elvis furrowed his brows and pulled up the beast's skin to cover her head, preventing the rainwater from entering her eyes. "I saw that you were not back for a long time and got a little anxious, so I came in." Gu Mengmeng looked at the pile of prey behind Elvis and asked, It's too slow to kill them one by one. Why don't you just release your aura and save so much trouble? Elvis smiled dotingly as he brushed away the raindrops on Gu Mingming's face and said, Releasing your aura will scare the prey out of their guts and the meat will be bitter. How can we eat it then? Gu Mingming nodded, not really understanding. As a human, Gu Mingming did not have any hunting experience. As a snake basically swallowed whatever he wanted to eat and did not need to bring the prey back. Elvis carried all the prey onto his right shoulder and reached out his left arm to carry Gu Mingming up, saying, Let's go back, it's very dangerous in the forest when it's raining. If there's thunder, it'll hurt you easily. Gu Mingming smiled and said, So you left me outside and came in alone? Elvis nodded and kissed Gu Mingming's little face lightly, saying, Let's go back. Gu Mingming did not resist Elvis's kiss and just obediently placed her face on Elvis's chest, saying softly, Put down the prey. Elvis did not understand but still did as he was told. Gu Mingming gave him a look and many little snakes slowly slithered out from behind the trees, then burrowed under the prey and carried them up. Elvis chuckled and said, That's good too, at least you won't get any bloodstains on you. Gu Mingming did not say anything and just nodded in Elvis's arms, allowing him to carry her back. When they passed by the place where Gu Mingming was sitting, Burke had already left. When she returned to the stone house, Leah was sitting anxiously at the door, looking into the rain. He heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Gu Mingming. Without another word, he took Gu Mingming from Elvis's arms and walked into the house. He removed her clothes and placed her into the stone bathtub filled with hot water. Thank you. Gu Mingming leaned against the edge of the bathtub, tilting her face as she fiddled with the hot water. Leah squatted outside the bathtub and also leaned against the edge of the bathtub. He looked at Gu Mingming face to face and asked, This rain will last for about 10 days. Are you feeling suffocated at home? How about I bring Sandy over and ask her to keep you company? Gu Mingming shook her head and said, She always acts like she did something wrong in front of me and is so timid. I think seeing me, she is also very stressed. Forget it, I'm fine. Leah held Gu Mingming's little hand and said, How about, I will push all the matters in the tribe to Oakley and focus on staying at home to accompany you, all right? Gu Mingming chuckled and asked, It's just accompanying Elvis to hunt. Why are you so nervous? Chapter 630. Gu Mingming was taken aback. She chuckled and said, Burke was here just now? Leah nodded. When I came back, I realized that both you and Elvis were not around. I was afraid that something might have happened to you. So I went out to look for you. I met Borg, who had just returned from a hunt, and he said, Gu Mingming chuckled. You said I look very lonely sitting in the rain, as if I need someone to accompany me? Leah hesitated for a moment before nodding. Frowning slightly, his long and narrow eyes filled with heartache. His voice was as gentle as the moonlight. His slender fingers brushed past Gu Mingming's face and stopped at her left ear. My female needs someone to accompany her, and it's actually another male telling me. I must be a failure. Gu Mingming held Lee's hand gently and placed it on her face. With a gentle gaze, she said, I'm just accompanying Elvis to hunt and taking the chance to relax. I'm not alone, and you're not ignoring me. I know that the reason why you've been teaching Oakley without eating or sleeping is so that you can accompany me back to St. Nazaire as soon as possible. Don't worry, I'm fine. If I really need anything, I will tell you personally. I will not let you miss the time when I need you. As for Borg, he's just an outsider. Why should I care about what he says? Leah chuckled. That's true, he's not the real Jean. With that, Elvis carried a big bowl of ginger water into the house and knelt down on one knee beside Gu Mingming. He blew on the spoon until it warmed up before sending it to Gu Mingming's lips. Drink some to warm up your body. Gu Mingming did not reject him and allowed Elvis to feed her a big bowl. After showering and drinking the ginger water, Gu Mingming changed into a clean set of clothes and sat at the door, staring outside in a daze. Elvis and Leah were dealing with their prey at the back of the stone house. In the rain, someone ran towards Gu Mingming, but stopped not too far away. He did not go any closer, nor did he leave. He just stood there and stared at Gu Mingming for a long time, before lowering his head and turning to leave. Gu Mingming recognized that person's aura. It was Burke. He should have come to see her, but since he didn't, it should be nothing important. Perhaps, he just wanted to make sure that she had returned safely. Gu Mingming did not greet Burke. She did not even look at him or give him any response. It was as if he was just a drop in the heavy rain, insignificant. The heavy rain continued for 13 days, and Burke stared at Gu Mingming in the rain for 13 days. On the 14th day, the weather was clear. Gu Mingming stretched her arms and finally walked under the sunlight. Reaching out his hand to block the bright sun, he squinted his eyes to adjust to the light that leaked through the gaps between his fingers. She felt the weight on her waist lightening as she landed in Elvis's chest. His warm voice sounded above her head, sounding sweet and melancholic. "Where do you want to go? I'll accompany you." Gu Mingming had not gone out for a long time, so she lazily leaned into Elvis's arms. "Let's go and see Leah. If things are more or less settled, I want to return to Saint Nazaire." "All right," Elvis answered softly. When Elvis carried Gu Mingming into the meeting room, Leah and Oakley were discussing whether to stay or leave. It was inevitable for Gu Mingming to return to Saint Nazaire. When they came out, the salt they brought was almost finished, so they had to return as soon as possible. But the problem now was who would follow Gu Mingming back to Saint Nazaire, and who would stay in Solder to guard the branch. Out of topic. Today's update had ended. It was almost March and Susu was working hard to save her chapters, preparing for the explosive update in March. My babies, please keep looking forward to it. Also, it was almost the end of the month. The monthly ticket would expire. Chapter 631. Mingming. Li's face was filled with fatigue, but his eyes still lit up when he saw Gu Mingming. There was a chair in the main seat of the meeting room which had the feel of the Hall of Justice. Other than Gu Mingming, no one else dared to sit on that chair. Even Leah had never sat on it before. Gu Mingming did not have much feelings towards such formality, but Elvis would always put her in that position every time she came over, so she got used to it after a while. Leah sat beside Gu Mingming's legs and laid on her knees to look up at her. His furry tail swayed gently and finally landed in Gu Mingming's arms. No matter how tired he was, he still smiled blissfully and asked, "It's rare for the weather to be clear. Why did you come to the meeting room instead of walking around?" Gu Mingming fiddled with Li's tail, which was getting firmer by the day, and looked at Oakley, who had not spoken to her properly ever since her identity as the messenger of the beast deity was verified. She said, "I came to see how busy you guys are and if there's anything you need my help with." Oakley lowered his head and stood at the side respectfully. He said, "I am discussing with Mighty Leah about the candidates to follow you back to Saint Nazaire. Mighty Messenger, please tell me if there are any of them you wish to bring along or leave behind." Gu Mingming looked at Oakley and did not speak for a long while. She pursed her lips and seemed to be in a trance. Back then, he used a white fox to express his goodwill to her, followed her to gather honey without knowing anything, roasted meat with Barit and Colin outside Elvis's cave, and prepared rations before winter. It was as if it was just yesterday. Since when did that shy but clever Oakley become so distant and not dare to get close to her? Gu Mingming said, "In the past we didn't talk like this." Oakley pursed his lips and lowered his head. "In the past, you were not the messenger of the beast deity." Gu Mingming sighed softly, and did not say anything else. It was very difficult to maintain a basic friendship between males and females. That boundary was too difficult to grasp. Snake was the best example. Perhaps, this was already the best outcome. Without further ado, Gu Mingming rubbed her temples and said, "The original tribesmen of Saint Nazaire can stay if they want. Those who don't follow me back. Burke and the newly joined tribesmen must all follow me. As for the Snow Fox clan, except for Leah, everyone else will stay." Oakley frowned and thought for a moment before replying, "Other than Lord Leah, I'm afraid those few elders will be thinking too much." Gu Mingming chuckled and said, "Don't they like to worship the esoterica? I'll leave a set of secret manuals for them to worship, so they won't make trouble again." Oakley lifted his head and looked at Gu Mingming in confusion, not saying a word. Gu Mingming asked Oratin and Barit to bring back 2 large stone slabs. The size was comparable to the blackboards in school, and the surface had been polished to be extremely smooth. Then they dipped a branch into the ashes left over from the fire, and wrote some words on the stone slab. Then, Elvis, Leah, Oriton and Barit used their sharp claws to slowly carve the inscriptions on the stone slab along the traces left by the ashes. It would take 3 days for everything to be done. Leah stared at the stone tablet for a long time, then pointed at one of the tablets and asked, "Meng Meng, what's written on it? Can you tell me?" Chapter 632. 36 Stratagems? Leah looked at Gu Mengmeng in confusion. Gu Mengmeng nodded and said, "Do you remember? You told me before that half of the esoterica in the Snow Fox tribe can only be learned by the leaders, while the other half can only be learned by the witch doctor." Leah nodded to show that he remembered. Gu Mengmeng continued, "The deduction skills you know are not from our world. Damn, it was most likely taught by the beast deity to the previous messenger, who then taught it to the witch doctor, and then passed it down from generation to generation. However, the secret manuals memorized by the leaders are very likely products of our era." Leah looked at Gu Mengmeng, then at the stone tablet that was carved with unknown symbols and said, "This 36 stratagems is one of them?" Gu Mengmeng nodded and said, "I suspect that Cole knows how to memorize this 36 stratagems." Leah asked, "Did the beast deity tell you that?" Gu Mengmeng said, "No, I guessed it." Leah did not probe further, and just looked at Gu Mengmeng quietly. Gu Mengmeng walked to the front of the second stone tablet and stroked a line of words, reading slowly. 34 stratagems, the trick of injuring oneself to gain the confidence of others. If one does not harm himself, the victim must be real. False is real, true is false. The luck of childlike innocence, follow the sun. The 5 males in the house were all confused, and even Leah did not understand what Gu Mengmeng was saying. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and continued, "This is one stratagem in the 36 stratagems. I have read it before but actually did not remember it. But ever since I integrated Snake's ability, everything I have seen in the past has mysteriously become very clear. It feels like something like a photographic memory." The moment Gu Mengmeng mentioned Snake, Elvis and Leah tensed up. They were especially afraid that she would sink into that negative calmness again. So Leah pulled Gu Mengmeng's little hand and asked with a serious face, "So what does it mean? What does it have to do with Cole?" Gu Mengmeng said, "Do you still remember when Cole tricked me into coming to solder, and in order to gain my trust, he injured himself all over to create the illusion that he was rescuing Qi Xian?" Leah nodded to show that he remembered. Gu Mengmeng said, "His injuries were so severe that he almost lost his life. It's not an exaggeration to say that his internal organs were all exposed in front of me. If you hadn't asked Dylan to contact me in advance, I would have believed that he was a good person even if I had my doubts. Now that I think about it, it was just a ruse to injure oneself to gain confidence." Leah pondered for a moment and said, "If people don't harm themselves, the victims must be real?" Gu Mengmeng nodded. "That's what I mean." Leah frowned. Then when Burke came to seek refuge, he was covered in injuries. Was that also a ruse? Gu Mengmeng shook her head. Burke did not purposely inflict those injuries. They must have been inflicted when the stray beasts attacked the tribe. Leah was silent for a moment before he said slowly, "Mengmeng, I still feel that Burke is not simple." Gu Mengmeng chuckled. "Cole would not go through so much trouble to send a useless person over. He must have a backup plan." Leah, "I think so too. Cole was a stray beast now. Why would he be so kind as to help a foreign tribe chase away stray beasts? No matter how I look at it, it doesn't seem like his style. I would rather believe it if he was the one who organized the stray beasts to attack Burke's tribe." Chapter 633. Leah was stunned, as if he suddenly thought of something. He asked, "So Burke coming to seek refuge is also one of the plans?" Gu Mengmeng nodded and took another step forward. She touched a line of words and said, "The 7th stratagem. Create something out of nothing." It was a lie, not a lie. It was all a lie. Xiaoyin Taiyang Taiyang. Leah did not really understand the explanation in this plan, but he was sure of one thing. Gu Mengmeng knew clearly that Burke's allegiance was not simple. Elvis took a step forward and stood beside Gu Mengmeng. He frowned and said, "Since there's something wrong with Burke, there's no need to bring him back to St. Nazaire. I'll go there later and settle it on the spot." Gu Mingming held onto Elvis's arm and shook her head lightly. She took 2 steps back and pointed at another line of words. With a cold gaze she said, "The 30th stratagem, reverse the situation. Take advantage of the gap to step in, choke the host, and gradually advance." Li's hand gently brushed past a line of words, and finally met Gu Mingming's hand. With a light grip, he held her little hand in his palm. There was a hint of a smile in his long and narrow eyes. "Mingming is planning to use Burke to lure Cole out?" Gu Mingming nodded and said, "Although I still don't know why he inserted Burke, but there's no harm in countering his moves. If he wanted Borg to work for him, he would have to meet Borg on a regular basis and exchange information. So as long as we keep an eye on Burke, we can definitely wait for Cole." Leah held Gu Mingming's hand and tugged her gently towards him. Looking into her eyes, he said gently and lovingly, "I know you are anxious to save Qi Xian, but you have to promise me that you will not put yourself in danger, all right?" Gu Mingming chuckled. "How long more do you need to get used to the Beast King's powers in my body?" Leah shook his head, his gaze still focused on Gu Mingming's face. With a serious and cautious expression, he said, "In terms of power, no one can match up to you. But back then when we were fighting Cole, neither Elvis nor I were his match. If Cole really knows how to use the things on the stone tablet, we have to be extra careful." Gu Mingming nodded, indicating that she understood. It was easy to dodge an open spear, but difficult to guard against a hidden arrow. She understood this principle. "All right, let's first embed these 2 stone slabs into the wall, then cover them with animal skins." A half-arm deep groove had already been dug in the wall, and the large stone tablet was placed in it at a slight angle. Then it was pushed and stuck inside. Gu Mingming shook it lightly and realized that it was still very stable. She nodded her head in satisfaction, then took out 2 large pieces of beast skin and covered the notch. Only then did he invite the elders of the Snow Fox clan in. Ever since the bonfire party, the few elders had boasted of their virtue and prestige. After a period of time, they really did seem to have some sage-like demeanor. This subordinate greets Lord Envoy. The few old foxes bowed respectfully to Gu Mingming. Gu Mingming raised her hand and went straight to the point. "These 2 days, I will be bringing a portion of my tribesmen back to St. Nazaire. As for Sauter, I will leave Oakley behind to manage the overall situation. I hope that the few elders can cooperate and support him." When these words came out, the elders were all stunned. Before they could even speak, their faces were already unable to maintain their composure. Chapter 634. Gu Mingming's emphasis on the word, trusted, indeed made the elders' eyes light up, and the unwillingness on their faces visibly disappeared. Gu Mingming gave them a look and Oriton and Barit lifted up the beast skin. The 36 stratagems, engraved on the stone tablet, appeared in front of the few old foxes. The few elders' eyes widened. Although they did not recognize the words on it, they clearly knew that it was the symbol of the beast deity. Then, they hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed 9 times towards the stone tablet. Gu Mingming suddenly thought of the days when she worked at the amusement park. Some of the older tourists also had the same habit. They would crazily take pictures whenever they saw a stone with words on it, as if the stone was something special. However, these few were obviously crazier than the rest. Holding her forehead, Gu Mingming looked coldly at the few old foxes' devotion in front of the stone tablet. After they were done with their work, Gu Mingming then said, "Under the orders of the beast deity, the esoterica engraved here is to frighten the evil spirits and protect the people. The few elders are highly respected and are the best candidates to protect it." But Gu Mingming purposely dragged out her words and sized up the anxious elders from the corner of her eyes. Seeing that they were about to pounce on her, she then continued, "But Oakley is still young after all. It seems like a grievance for the few elders to stay behind and cooperate with him. Of course, although I am the messenger of the beast deity, I am also a democratic person. I respect the opinions of the elders. If you are not willing, I will not force you." An old man was the first to kneel down and prostrate himself at Gu Mingming's feet. He said, "We are the most loyal servants of the messenger. It is our duty to share the messenger's burden. There is no grievance, no force. Protecting the esoterica is our honor. Great messenger, please grant us our wish. I am willing to stay behind and cooperate with the witch Dr. Oakley." With one taking the lead, how could the rest be willing to fall behind? Thus, Gu Mingming used 2 stones to settle these few old foxes. After a round of consolation, the elders left the meeting room with tears streaming down their faces, feeling extremely gratified. Gu Mingming heaved a long sigh of relief. She leaned against her seat tiredly. Leah stood at the side and wrapped his arm around Gu Mingming's shoulders. He wrapped his arm around her neck and gently rubbed her temples. He said, "Why do you have to entertain them personally? You can leave these matters to me." Gu Mingming looked up with a smile. "You have been working hard for half a month, so that I can return to Saint Nazir as soon as possible. You even have dark circles under your eyes." Leah touched his eyes instinctively and asked worriedly, "Am I ugly?" Gu Mingming chuckled. "Didn't you claim to be the most handsome male in the world? Are you worried now?" Leah pinched Gu Mingming's little nose and said, "It's all because I'm afraid that you won't like me if I'm ugly." Gu Mingming rubbed herself in Lee's arms and said, "I left everyone from the Snow Fox clan behind. Will you feel uncomfortable?" Leah paused and shook his head. "No matter how much they flatter me now and address me as the Ninth Highness, I know very well that I can no longer treat them as my own tribesmen." Gu Mingming looked up at Leah, her gaze filled with heartache. Chapter 635. Oakley frowned, looking like he had a lot on his mind. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. Gu Mingming looked up at Oakley and said, "Just say what you want to say, don't hold it in and cause internal injuries." Oakley hesitated for a moment and said, "This stone tablet. Is it really all right to leave it here? What if Cole's men secretly come to snatch it?" Gu Mingming chuckled and said, 36 Stratagems is just an ordinary book in my world and anyone can read it. But knowing how to read and knowing how to use are 2 completely different concepts. Let's not talk about the fact that the people here don't know these words. Even if they do, how much do they know?" Oakley did not understand and asked, "Didn't you say that Cole knows how to use it?" Gu Mingming looked at Leah and then at Oakley and smiled. "Cole knows how to use 36 stratagems not because he knows how to read, but because his father's generation after generation memorized it and passed it down to him. He may be smart and knows how to use it, but he is obviously not mature enough. To understand these stratagems, you need to use some historical references. 36 stratagems without any historical references is like a martial arts esoterica without any internal techniques. It's just an empty shell, and won't be able to kill anyone." Oakley looked at Gu Mingming, not fully understanding, then at Leah. Leah rubbed Gu Mingming's head with a doting expression, then glanced at Oakley and said, "Listen to Gu Mingming's arrangements. You don't need to understand, just do as I say." Oakley still felt uneasy, but there was nothing he could do. After thinking for a long while, he looked up and asked, "If something happens in Sauter that I can't handle, how do I inform you?" Gu Mingming looked at the door and said softly, "Stop hiding, come in." After some rustling, a male with a feminine face walked into the meeting room. He only looked at Gu Mingming from the corner of his eyes and bowed politely, saying, "Saintess." Snake had made her the Saintess of the Snake King Valley, and announced that from the moment she took up the position, the meaning of the Saintess would be different from before. Snake had originally promised her to remove this title, but it was too late. Forget it. This title was also a memento left by Snake. Anyway, no one could force her to do anything, Saintess it be. "Wabi, I sent you?" Gu Mingming asked. The snake beast nodded and replied, "Wabi, I ordered us to stay by your side. If we encounter any trouble, we are to send word back to the Snake King Valley, and let them resolve it." Gu Mingming chuckled. She knew very well that Wabi only wanted to protect her because of Snake. "You stay in Sauter to help Oakley. If you meet with any troublesome situation, you just need a little snake to send a message to Saint Nazir," Gu Mingming said. The snake beast's face darkened. It glanced at Oakley and said reluctantly, "I want to guard the saint." Gu Mingming sneered and slowly activated the Snake King's pressure in her body. The snake beast trembled and knelt down. Its forehead was covered in sweat, and it bit its lower lip, not daring to resist. Gu Mingming slowly retracted her pressure and said, "Keep your useless worries and obey my orders." The snake beast replied with a trembling voice, "Yes." Gu Mingming stood up, and Elvis carried her up. When he passed by Oakley, Gu Mingming said, "If there are no other problems, I will set off for Saint Nazaire 3 days later." Chapter 636. After exiting the meeting room, she saw Huda and his brothers playing with Qi Xian at the entrance. When they saw Gu Mingming coming out, they all pounced on her. "Mummy!" Kanwu was the first to reach Gu Mingming. He raised his little face and asked, "Are we going home?" Gu Mingming wanted to get down from Elvis's arms, but Elvis hugged her even tighter. He looked down at Kanwu from above, and did not say a single word, but there was an aura of hurry and get lost. Gu Mingming knew that Elvis was competing with Kanwu again, but she could not embarrass him in front of his son. So she patted Kanwu's little head and replied gently, "Yes, we will set off in 3 days. Are you happy?" Kanwu also completely ignored Elvis. He nodded and said, "I'm happy. I can participate in the hunt with the big tribe on the way back." Jiaoyu also chimed in. "Yes, there are not so many things to do on the way back. Daddy Leah will have time to teach me the art of deduction." Huda looked at Qi Xian in his arms. He smiled especially amiably and had a maturity that did not match his age. "Will you wake up when we return to a familiar place?" Gu Mingming looked at Qi Xian without saying a word. She was silently calculating in her heart. What was Cole planning by pushing Burke to her side? Everything had a motive. So what was Cole's motive? It seemed like she had to start with Burke to capture Cole. Gu Mingming turned back to look at Barit. "Call Burke over." Barit nodded. He did not say a word. He just turned around and walked towards the edge of solder. Orton followed for 2 steps before looking up at Gu Mingming. He said expressionlessly, "I will go hunt and then share a meal." Gu Mingming chuckled. "There are so many beauties in solder. Have you not taken a liking to any of them?" Orton did not seem to understand what Gu Mingming meant. He looked at her in a daze. He did not speak or move. Gu Mingming said, "Find a suitable female to start a family with. It's not a good idea to always share a meal with me." Orton said, "I am your guardian beast. I cannot start a family with other females." Gu Mingming shook her head. "You don't like me, do you?" Orton lowered his head slightly, as if he was thinking seriously. Then he shook his head and said, "I like you." Gu Mingming was slightly surprised and asked, "You like me? What do you like about me?" Orton replied very seriously, "Your family's food is the best." Gu Mingming was taken aback for a moment, before she suddenly laughed. Their personalities are so different, but why are they so similar in terms of gluttony? Orton did not know what Gu Mingming was smiling about. He turned to look at Elvis and realized that his face was filled with gentleness. His pair of blue eyes curved into a curve as Gu Mingming smiled. Orton could not really understand the feeling of having all his emotions affected by a female. He did not know if all females had this ability or only Gu Mingming had this ability. For someone like him who had almost forgotten his emotions, who knew if he could be saved if he mated with Gu Mingming? One day in the future, would she be able to smile unknowingly like Elvis? Chapter 637. Gu Mingming did not insist any further. She no longer had the passion she had when she helped Sandy and Colin build the bridge. She did not want to interfere too much in other people's lives. When Elvis carried Gu Mingming back to the stone house, Barit and Burke were already waiting at the door. Barit straightened his back when he saw Gu Mingming. His long, soldier-like face had become even more resolute in the past 2 months, and he was even more taciturn. It was as if other than in front of Gu Mingming, he did not even open his mouth to speak much. "I've brought her." Barit opened his mouth, as if he was reporting for work, concise and to the point. With that, he returned to stand behind Elvis and continued his role as the messenger's guard. He did not speak much and did not steal the limelight. If one did not look closely, he would look like a background version of Gu Mengmeng. Elvis carried Gu Mengmeng and sat on the stone steps at the door. Leah swayed his tail and walked past Burke. He paused for a moment and chuckled. He did not say anything and just walked to the simple stove to start a fire. Gu Mengmeng sat in Elvis's arms lazily. She glanced sideways at Burke and smiled. 3 days later, I will be returning to St. Nazaire. You and your tribesmen can follow me back. Burke clenched his fists by the sides of his body and slowly released them. He did not dare to look straight at Gu Mengmeng, and could only stare at her shadow that was elongated by the sun. Frowning, he replied, "Can we stay in Sauder? My tribesmen are already too old. They cannot withstand the frequent travel." Gu Mengmeng was taken aback. "You're not coming with me?" Gu Mengmeng asked. Could it be that Cole's motive for arranging for Burke to come here was not for her, but to regain control of Sauder? Burke shook his head with difficulty. "I want to go with you, but if I leave, there will be no one to provide food for my tribesmen." Originally, the 2 half-orc females in our tribe could recruit family members through mating after joining a new tribe, and continue to take care of our tribesmen. But Sauder did not lack females at all. How could 2 half-orc females snatch resources from the group of complete females who were at the top of the tribes? Even Maya and Sandy, who were considered average-level half-orc females, did not manage to recruit a single new member after coming to Sauder, let alone the old, weak, sick and disabled who were burdened with their entire families. Of course, Sandy was very satisfied with Colin and wouldn't give any other male a chance. Otherwise, just based on her identity as the best friend of the messenger of the beast deity, there would still be people who would be willing to mate with her. Gu Mengmeng nodded and did not force him. "Since that's the case, I won't force you. You can go back." Burke secretly lifted his eyes and stared deeply at Gu Mengmeng. Her lonely appearance in the rain made him toss and turn in bed, unable to sleep. He couldn't tell if what he saw on her face that day were tears or rain, but those clear eyes were calm without a trace of emotion. It made his heart ache and made him want to protect her. If he could, he wanted to stay by her side regardless of everything. He didn't want to let her sit alone in the rain, and he didn't want her to have any time to be lonely. But in the end, Burke only replied with a "okay." He then turned around and left with heavy footsteps. She glanced sideways and realized that Leah was nibbling on her neck. His strength was neither light nor heavy. It was slightly painful but not injurious. It was filled with lust and punishment. After a long while, when Gu Mengmeng's entire body turned limp, the two of them released her in unison. Chapter 639. Barit is still watching. "You two. Stop fooling around." Gu Mengmeng could not even complete her sentence. Elvis and Leah were messing around with her body as if they had planned it beforehand, causing her heart to beat erratically. Barit silently lowered his head and said, "I'll go to Oakley's and inform him." Barit only left Gu Mengmeng with a resolute back view. He liked Gu Mengmeng. He had liked her ever since she came to the tribe. But he knew that protecting her as a guard was already the closest he could get. Elvis and Leah would not give him a chance to improve. If he was too greedy, the two of them would definitely not tolerate him. So, knowing when to leave was the only way for him to stay by her side. After Barit left, Elvis and Leah finally let Gu Mengmeng off after she repeatedly begged for mercy. "Don't say such things again, or else I will personally kill Qixian," Elvis said coldly. Gu Mengmeng pursed her lips, her gaze cold. This was the second time he said he wanted to kill her sons. Previously it was Kanwu, this time it was Qixian. Why were her sons so lowly in his eyes? Elvis seemed to know what Gu Mengmeng was thinking about. He straightened her body and made her sit face to face with him. Then he said cautiously, "Compared to you, everything else in this world is insignificant. So is the tribe, so is my sons, and so am I. You have become like this because of them, and that is the limit of my tolerance." If you continue to place yourself as a sacrifice for them, I can only kill them personally to protect you. If you dare to touch my sons, I will hate you. Gu Mingming's face was filled with anger as she said unhappily. Elvis smiled bitterly and said, I know. If you hate me, I will live a life worse than death. But compared to you, my pain is not worth mentioning. Gu Mingming lowered her head and looked at her own knees. This pair of legs were exchanged for by Snake's life. She knew better than anyone else how stubborn the males in the beast world were in love. Wasn't that so? If you want, Leah and I are willing to risk our lives to accompany you for one night. Elvis hooked Gu Mingming's lips and kissed her lips. Different from the punishment kiss just now, this kiss was extremely gentle. After the kiss, Gu Mingming even felt that her brain was lacking oxygen, and her breathing was not smooth. Elvis hugged her shoulders and placed her on his chest. While giving her support, he did not let her discover the wound in his eyes. If you want a few more partners, Barit, Oriton, and Ian are all good choices. But don't let it be Cole. He's not worthy. Gu Mingming leaned into Elvis's arms and chuckled. I know, I don't want any more partners and I won't take Cole in as a beast pet. It's just something I said in a moment of anger. Why take it so seriously? Leah squatted in front of Gu Mingming with one knee on the ground. He placed Gu Mingming's little hand by his lips and kissed it. Then he looked straight into Gu Mingming's eyes and said, If it can make you happy, we don't mind having a few more family members. It didn't matter if it was a partner or a pet, as long as it could make you happy. But don't let it be Cole, he's too dangerous and dirty. Gu Mingming smiled and said, You and Elvis are enough for me. I don't need any more partners or beast pets. Barit, Oriton, Ian, I don't want any of them. Cole. Needless to say, don't worry, all right? Aside from the topic. Chapter 640. 3 days later, Gu Mingming set off for St. Nazaire. Other than Oakley and Barit, the rest of the St. Nazaire tribesmen who had migrated over during the attack on Cole followed Gu Mingming. A few of the snow foxes also wanted to follow Gu Mingming back to St. Nazaire, but were stopped by Leah using the 2 stone tablets. The 16 valued females, Maya and Sandy, 18 big families and some single males who had yet to mate, walked out of Sauter's main entrance in a majestic manner. Looking back, Oakley, Barit and the snake beast sent by Wabi were standing at the door like abandoned dogs, looking at them from afar. Gu Mingming sighed softly and turned back. Elvis tightened his arms around her waist and asked, Worried? Gu Mingming nodded and said, Barit is just a 3rd-level beast. If he really meets Cole, he can't even protect himself. How can he protect Oakley? I just feel it's too risky. Elvis said, Should we send someone to the Snake King Valley to send a message and invite Wabi over to protect them in secret? Gu Mingming thought for a moment and shook her head, saying, Let's not talk about how Cole wouldn't dare to show himself if Wabi is around. Also, with Wabi's temper, I'm afraid that Barit and Oakley will die in Wabi's hands before Cole arrives. Leah walked beside Elvis and held Gu Mingming's little hand, saying, If you are really worried, I will call the 2 of them over and return to St. Nazaire together. Let's leave Sauter to those few old things. If Cole's motive is to snatch Sauter back, then it would be more beneficial for Cole if the 2 of them are not around. Gu Mingming shook her head and said, Cole clearly knows that I have already found out that Burke was instigated by him to come to Sauter. If I am not prepared at all, it will only arouse his suspicions. Elvis said slowly, Being too perfect in itself is a loophole. Gu Mingming nodded and did not say a word. She just went through the plan again in her mind and tried to think through the details more clearly so that she could deal with it. The speed of the large group was much slower than when Elvis, Leah and Gu Mingming were traveling alone. Females were delicate and could not stand the long journey, although they had experienced it last time and were much better this time. The morning's journey had made them complain incessantly. Gu Mingming was not really in a hurry to rush back to St. Nazaire, so she found a better place in the forest in the afternoon and ordered them to rest on the spot. The males went hunting while the females gathered around Gu Mingming. On the other hand, their partners could only sit on the outermost edge of the females' group to protect her. They couldn't even get close to their own female. Even Elvis and Leah were pushed out by these females. Gu Mengmeng gave them a reassuring smile, then sat among the group of females and chatted with them to soothe their emotions. Great messenger, I've heard Sandy talk about you and Ucigene before, but I'm still very curious. Can you tell us more? The one speaking was Mandy, the first beauty of the beast world that Gu Mengmeng had chosen. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and shook her head. You guys have heard the story of Ucigene so many times, aren't you sick of it? Mandy's eyes brightened. She leaned closer to Gu Mengmeng and asked, Great messenger, from what you said, does it mean that you have other stories to tell us? Gu Mengmeng chuckled. Looking at the 18 pairs of big eyes that were shining with anticipation, she could only nod her head and say, Yeah, let me tell you a short story. The beginning of the story was about a fish that fell in love with a flying bird. Digression. The story of the bird and fish. A long time ago, a fish and a bird fell in love. But God told them that they would never be lovers. Even becoming friends was an extravagant wish. Even if they loved each other, this lifetime was unattainable. The fish hated the restraints of the seawater and longed for the feeling of being free and aloof in the blue sky. The bird hated the empty blue sky and longed to bathe in the seawater and walk in it. Chapter 641. Although it was a story, it was actually just a script for a play that Gu Mengmeng had performed in the past when she was working at the amusement park. The entire play was about 40 minutes long, but with Gu Mengmeng narrating it alone, it was at most 10 minutes long. The people who went hunting returned one after another. From afar, Gu Mengmeng could see her 2 meat buns mixed in with the group. Jiaoyu stayed behind to take care of Qi Xian and pestered Leah to tell him some deductions, so he did not go hunting with them. Meanwhile, Huda and Kanwu followed the rest of the group. Seeing her sons, Gu Mengmeng's expression became much gentler. She clapped her hands and said, All right ladies, today's story ends here. Everyone go back to your own males and have a good rest. After dinner, we will continue our journey in the afternoon. The females still wanted to hear more stories, but did not dare to pester them too much. Mandy and Sandy each took the lead to evacuate a few females before the rest of the group dispersed one after another. Mandy stood behind Gu Mengmeng, feeling rather bashful. She tugged at Gu Mengmeng's skirt and asked softly, That flying bird that fell in love with the fish, is it Ian? Gu Mengmeng was stunned for a moment, before shaking her head in exasperation. Everything about the beast world was good, except for this habit of letting one's imagination run wild. Gu Mengmeng gently held Mandy's shoulders and said, That's just a story, don't think too much about it. Hurry and go back. Your males are still waiting. Mandy nodded, but her eyes secretly peeked up at the treetops. Gu Mengmeng knew that this clearly meant that Ian was one of the main characters in the story. Forget it, let her fantasize all she wants. After sending Mandy off, the 2 meat buns that had returned from hunting ran to Gu Mengmeng. Mummy here. Kanwa's speed was always faster. Although Huda was the big brother, he was not Kanwa's match in terms of stamina. When Kanwa ran to Gu Mengmeng, Huda was still 5 to 6 meters behind him. Gu Mengmeng looked at the dead rabbit and gently rubbed Kanwa's head, saying, Kanwa is really awesome. Rabbits were agile, so it was very difficult to catch them. You are really amazing. Kanwa was extremely enraged after receiving the compliment. His azure blue eyes seemed to stare at Elvis. He clearly had a young and tender face, but it had an inexplicable sense of provocation. Elvis clenched his teeth and walked to Kanwa's side. He grabbed the back of his neck and lifted him up to eye level, saying coldly, Don't you know the rules? Kanwa bared his fangs and brandished his claws, but he could not even touch a single strand of Elvis's hair. Gritting his teeth, he said, The prey is for my mother, it's fine as long as my mother likes it. Why are you so nosy? Elvis pinched Kanwa's face and forcefully turned his head to look at the dead rabbit. Then he said coldly, word by word, Do you think my wife would like that ugly piece of trash whose skin and flesh were all torn apart? Kanwa's face twitched. Kanwa choked and could not say a word. It was his first time participating in a hunt, and that rabbit was indeed too cunning. So, his death was a little tragic, but he still felt indignant after hearing Elvis's words. Kanwa's eyes lit up. Seeing that her son was about to cry from Elvis's words, Kanwa did not want to cry at all. It was purely his mother's imagination. Gu Mingming hurriedly stood up and grabbed the rabbit's ears. She chuckled, "Haha. I really want to eat rabbits today. Not bad, not bad." Aside from the topic, the story of bird and fish, the fish did not want to give up because it felt the blue sky calling it. The bird did not want to give up because it felt that the sea was its true home. Just like that, the fish and the bird kept trying to get closer, but in the process of getting closer to their dreams, they were getting closer to death. The fish said to the bird, "You were originally in the sky. You should be flying around." The bird said to the fish, "You were originally in the sea. You should be swimming around." The fish said to the bird, "If birds and fish can love each other, then where should we build our nests?" The fish's tears fell into the sea. The bird said to the fish, "Look at me, I will tell you the answer." The bird flew up into the sky for the last time. Chapter 642. Elvis casually threw Kanwu aside and took over the bloody rabbit from Gu Mingming's hands. "I'll help you hunt a giant rabbit this ha." Gu Mingming nudged Elvis's chest lightly and said softly, "It's my son's first time hunting and he gave me his prey. Can you not hurt our child?" Elvis raised his brow. "It's already not good. Can't I tell the truth?" Gu Mingming looked at Elvis in rebuke. Elvis took a deep breath and wiped off the blood on Gu Mingming's fingers. "You're glaring at me because of him again. I really hate them more and more." Gu Mingming said, "Hubby." Kanwu walked forward and hugged Gu Mingming's thigh. He raised his little face and said seriously, "Mummy, don't be sad. It's alright if he hates me. I don't like him anyway." Gu Mingming's lips twitched. They were really biological father and son. Identification complete. Elvis ignored Kanwu and only instructed Leah before running into the depths of the forest. Hutta held onto a wild bird's neck and stood 2 steps away. He was hesitating if he should go closer. Gu Mingming waved her hand and called Hutta over. She touched his sweaty little face and asked, "What did you hunt? Let Mummy take a look too." Hutta placed the wild bird in front of Gu Mingming. "My prey is not even as good as Kanwa's," Gu Mingming chuckled. "Both of you are great. It's already not bad to have such results on your first hunt." Hutta said, "But Beast Father said." Gu Mingming pinched the cheeks of her 2 sons. "Beast Father is using his own method to motivate you and hope that you can do better. Don't be sad. He doesn't really despise you." Kanwu sighed and acted like a little adult. "He ran away after getting into trouble and still needs Mummy to help him clean up. Sigh, when can he be more reliable?" Gu Mingming laughed at Kanwa's words. She hugged him and kissed him. "Beast Father is afraid that we don't have enough food, so he went to replenish our prey." Kanwa hugged Gu Mingming's neck and kissed her on the cheek. Then he looked at Gu Mingming seriously with his azure blue eyes and said, "Forget it, don't help him explain. You already have enough troubles with such an unreliable first partner. But it doesn't matter. The 4 of us will grow up as soon as possible. At that time, you don't have to count on him. The 4 of us will protect you." Gu Mingming chuckled and nodded. "All right, I'll wait for my precious sons to grow up and protect me." Leah swayed his big tail as he held Jiaoyu's hand and walked over. With a light flick of his hand, Jiaoyu carried Qixuan and stood together with Hutta and Kanwu. Leah slowly squatted down beside Gu Mingming, wrapping his furry tail around her waist and pulling her into his arms. Resting his chin on his hands, he smiled amiably and said, "Brat, are you seducing my female?" Gu Mingming's face darkened. She slapped Lee's face and said, "Watch your words. He is my son." Kanwu sighed and shook his head. Chapter 643. Lee's nonchalant words made Yuan Sherwu's hair stand on end. Today was the first time he had gone hunting with his tribesmen. It was nerve-wracking and exciting. Although he had only hunted a small rabbit and there was still a lot of room for improvement in his skills, but he had received a compliment from his mother, not allowing him to go hunting from now on. Why not just chop off his 4 limbs and be done with it? He bared his teeth at Leah, looking like he was about to explode. He felt that if Leah was not carrying Gu Mengmeng in his arms, Kanwu would definitely pounce on him and bite him. Jiaoyu tugged at Kanwu lightly and whispered something into his ear. Kanwu paused for a moment and smiled sneakily for a second. Then he instantly lost his temper and sat on the ground. He lifted his little face and looked at Gu Mengmeng with a pair of watery blue eyes, melting Gu Mengmeng's heart. He sniffled and pouted, looking like he was about to cry but could not. "Mummy, do you not like the little rabbit I hunted? You also despise the prey I gave you, right?" So, whoa. Jiaoyu's little scheme was too obvious in Gu Mengmeng's eyes. But seeing through everything did not stop her from feeling sorry for her son. Gu Mengmeng pinched Leah and struggled out of his arms to hug Kanwu. She comforted him softly. "Kanwu, be good. Kanwu, don't cry. Mummy really likes the prey Kanwu gave to Mummy. You have done very well. Mummy is proud of you." Kanwu said, Whoa, but I can't hunt any more for Mummy, sob. Can I no longer receive Mummy's compliments? Can I no longer take care of Mummy? Then I will be abandoned by Mummy and become a wild wolf that no one wants? Sob. Mummy. Kanwu's unreasonable crying was, strictly speaking, illogical. But which mother in this world would not feel heartwarming when she heard her son trying so hard to take care of her, trying so hard to prove his capabilities in front of her? Gu Mengmeng patted Kanwu's back lightly. Then she tilted her head and stood on Kanwu's side without any principles. She glared at Leah and said with slight annoyance, "It's fine if Elvis is like this, but why are you like this too? What's the point of abusing your power to threaten a kid?" Leah was stunned for a moment after being scolded by Gu Mengmeng. He then smiled brightly and leaned his handsome face in front of Gu Mengmeng, the tip of his nose touching Gu Mengmeng's, as if he could not wait to see Gu Mengmeng in his eyes. The two pure white fox ears on the top of his head twitched twice, his voice ambiguous and excited. The moment he opened his thin lips, Lee's unique warm breath sprayed onto Gu Mengmeng's face, making her feel sentimental. "Mengmeng, you look so attractive when you are angry." Gu Mengmeng blushed at Lee's actions and instinctively took a step back. But Leah did not give up. His large tail quickly occupied her waist and pulled her towards him. He supported the back of her head with one hand and slid his other hand down her arm to her palm. He opened his fingers and slipped them through the gaps between her fingers. With one grip, all 10 fingers were locked tightly. "If you're angry, do you want me to pull your ears?" Gu Mengmeng's entire body stiffened from Lee's actions, but she did not know what to do. She turned around to seek help from her sons, only to see Jiaoyu sigh and pat Kanwu, saying, "Forget it, don't bother with a masochist. A normal person will never win against a lunatic." Chapter 644. The four sons sighed and walked away quietly. Gu Mengmeng face-bombed. What happened to the promised fatherly love and tall and lofty image? Why were these two fellows in her family disliked by their sons one after another? Was there really something wrong with her taste in men? Gu Mengmeng felt a deep sadness. Elvis did not need too much time to hunt. So not long after the 4 little ones left, Elvis was already carrying a huge rabbit that was 3 times the size of his human form back. Gu Mengmeng felt it was quite novel to see a whole prey after such a long time. Pushing Leah away, Gu Mengmeng walked to Elvis and looked at the owner who had purposely placed his prey beside Kanwa's little rabbit. Then, Elvis prodded the huge rabbit's skull with one hand and placed his palm on his temple. He sighed and said, "Is it a sense of achievement to win against your own sons?" Elvis hugged Gu Mengmeng into his arms and kissed her forehead gently. Then he said, "We have to let him know who is the boss in this family." Gu Mengmeng shook her head helplessly and said, "Do you know that you and Leah are already 2 perverts in our sons' hearts?" Elvis shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly and said, "Let them think whatever they want, I don't care." Gu Mengmeng sighed helplessly and accepted her fate. She did not force it. Leah leaned over and placed one hand on Elvis's shoulder while the other hand stroked his own tail in boredom. He said, I was reprimanded just now." Elvis frowned and looked at Leah with a serious expression. He asked, "Really? Xiaoming reprimanded you?" Lee's eyes lit up and he nodded his head excitedly. It was as if being scolded was an extremely honorable thing. Elvis was also a little agitated. he asked. Anything else? Did you take action? Lee's gaze darkened and he shook his head dejectedly. No. Elvis also sighed softly and said regretfully, forget it, it's already not easy to lose your temper and reprimand someone. This is a good thing. Maybe we can take action next time. A thick sign was flashing on Gu Mingming's forehead. No wonder her sons said that they were psychopaths who had masochistic tendencies. It was one thing for him to think of ways to make her happy every day. But now he had given up on himself to the point where he could be proud of making her angry? Gu Mingming took 2 steps forward and stretched out her 2 little black hands. She grabbed Elvis's ears with her left hand and Lee's right, and pulled them towards her. She asked with a smile, how is it? Are you satisfied? The eyes of the wolf and fox, whose ears had been twisted, lit up. They were like lottery winners sitting in front of the TV who had won the first prize. He hugged Gu Mingming excitedly, one black and one white, sandwiching Gu Mingming in the middle, forming a human wolf-fox sandwich. I can't breathe. Gu Mingming roared with a face full of despair. Elvis and Leah then calmed down and released her. Leah held onto Gu Mingming's shoulders and said, that's great, Gu Mingming. You can finally be angry. During this period of time, you haven't laughed or made a fuss. It's making my heart ache. It's good that you're angry. It's good that you have mood swings. I'll go cook for you. It'll be ready soon. With that, Leah kissed Gu Mingming's face heavily. Then, he swayed his tail and went to deal with the giant rabbit. It was not an exaggeration to say that Gu Mingming saw countless blooming flowers spinning around Leah. Chapter 645. After 3 days of journey, they had already covered half of the distance from Sadr to Saint Nazaire. The closer they were to Saint Nazaire, the more uneasy Gu Mingming felt. She always felt that there was a pair of eyes watching her in the dark, but she couldn't find anyone when she checked in private. Even Ian, who was hovering in the air, did not notice anything suspicious, so Gu Mingming could not help but attribute it all to homesickness. At night, a bright moon hung in the sky. The bright moonlight revealed a trace of coldness, like a white gauze curtain enveloping everything in the night. The verdant and tall ancient trees exuded a strange atmosphere in the darkness, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of awe. Everything was quiet. It was a night suitable for a good sleep. Suddenly, a shrill howl tore apart the silence. Gu Mingming opened her eyes abruptly. Elvis and Leah had already stood on her left and right, protecting her securely. Gu Mingming frowned and asked, "What's going on?" Elvis gave Leah a look and Leah immediately leaped out and started to control the scene. With families as units, the males surrounded their females in the middle to protect them. Elvis looked around warily as he replied, "They are stray beasts." Stray beasts. Gu Mingming's knowledge of these 3 words was limited. She only knew that it was an exiled orc, cold-blooded and heartless. The only time she had seen it was not long after they had mated. A few stray beasts were lured into the cave by her singing. Elvis was severely injured and unconscious at that time. Leah stayed in her cave. Gu Mingming felt a wave of disgust as she recalled the scenes of them eating her comrades. Frowning, he asked, "Can't we just expel it with our beast pressure?" Elvis said, "If it's only the 2 of us, this method would be the simplest and most effective." But Elvis's gaze swept across the crowd, especially the 18-week females, who were so frightened by the stray beast's voice that they almost burst into tears. "If we release our beast pressure, before the stray beasts are scared away, half of them would be scared to death." Gu Mingming frowned in frustration and sighed. "Go and help Leah. Do your best to protect the tribesmen. Don't worry about me. No one in the beast world is my match now." Elvis hesitated for a moment, but still nodded his head. He did not care what would happen to Saint Nazaire, but he knew that she cared. Elvis and Leah arranged the defense as quickly as possible based on their tacit understanding. Ian led the Eagle Owl tribe and circled twice in the sky. With a caw, they pointed out the enemy's location. Elvis frowned and cursed softly. "Damn it, we're already surrounded." Elvis, Leah and Oratin formed a triangle and guarded the outermost edge. Ian led the Eagle Owl tribe to control the overall situation in the air, waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Gu Mingming narrowed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly. She looked at the pairs of ghostly green eyes closing in on her from all directions. There were quite a few of them, and they were all level 3 or 4. Releasing beast pressure was the simplest method, but the fighting members would definitely fall to the ground before the other side. What to do? While Gu Mingming was thinking, the battle had already begun. Chapter 646. 7 to 8 4th-level orcs were trapping Elvis tightly. Elvis could not casually unleash his beast pressure, or else the beast pressure from these few 4th-level beasts would be enough to suppress 80% of his fighting power. Physical combat was the only way out. But even though he was strong, it was not easy for him to escape from the stray beast's reckless fighting style. Leah maintained absolute calmness during the battle. Even though it was a little strenuous for him to face 2 3rd-level orcs, he did not retreat a single step and defended a corner with all his might. The Eagle Owl tribe led by Ian circled in the sky, occasionally swooping down to catch a stray beast that was alone. Then they would quickly return to the sky and use their sharp claws to tear the stray beasts to shreds before landing heavily on the ground. Oriton was used to the stray beast's fighting style, so he was evenly matched with a 4th-level orc. No one had the upper hand. Colin and Sandy had leveled up to 3rd level after mating. Perhaps it was because he did not participate in the previous battle. He seemed to be fighting with all his might this time. But the difference in levels was absolute. Against a 4th-level stray beast, Colin's body was quickly covered in wounds of varying degrees. The rest also fought fiercely with their families as a unit. The scene was bloody and violent, with broken limbs flying in front of Gu Mingming's eyes. She thought she would be afraid, but the heat in her heart was not fear, but excitement. She wanted to participate in the battle, and even tear the enemies apart with her own hands. Gu Mingming was very clear that this excitement did not belong to her, but to Snake's boiling blood that had settled in her body. Sandy's face was pale with fright, and she clutched tightly onto the corner of Gu Mingming's clothes, unwilling to let go. Gu Mingming pursed her lips and stuffed the bun that was guarding her in place of Elvis into Sandy's arms, saying, "Help me look after these 4. Lowering her head, Gu Mingming was stunned for a moment. Then, an explosion sounded in her head, as if a bolt of lightning had struck her brain. "Where's Kanwu?" Gu Mingming asked angrily. Huda carried Qi-Xian in his arms, shielding Jiaoyu behind him. He was clearly very afraid, but he still had to pretend to be calm and protect his brother. Hearing Gu Mingming's question, he then realized that Kanwu had disappeared. He looked around frantically, but there was killing and blood everywhere. Huda's tiny body kept trembling, as if his throat was locked. He could not say a single word. Gu Mingming frowned and squatted down to look straight at Huda. She held onto his little shoulders and said, "Huda, Mummy is going to look for Kanwu now. You are the eldest. You have to take good care of your younger brothers. Before Mom comes back, find a place to hide and protect yourself and Aunt Sandy, okay?" Huda trembled and nodded, clearly afraid but still determined. He was the eldest brother, and he could not be weak at this time. Gu Mingming looked up at Sandy and said, "Help me take care of the child, I will be back soon." Sandy nodded with much difficulty, tears welling up in her eyes. She was clearly so scared that she wanted to cry, but she still let go of Gu Mingming's hand. Biting her lips, she reminded, "You have to be careful." Gu Mingming did not hear Sandy's reminder, because after leaving that sentence, Gu Mingming had already turned and dashed into the battlefield filled with killing. She did not have sharp fangs or claws, but she opened up a bloody path. As she walked past, she accurately slapped all the stray beasts to the ground. Chapter 647. Gu Mingming's eyes kept searching for Kanwu's figure amidst the chaotic killing. A wild jackal with bloodshot eyes leaped up after biting off an orc's throat, pouncing towards Gu Mingming. Gu Mingming's eyes did not see the incoming danger. Instead, her body reacted instinctively based on Risnella's battle memories. She lifted one leg in an instant, and the moment her height exceeded the jackal, she slammed it down harshly. Her heel directly smashed onto the jackal's nose, creating a huge pit when it landed on the ground. Gu Mingming did not lower her head to look, but continued searching for Kanwu. The jackal only had half a head left, and its brain matter was splattered everywhere. However, no one showed any mercy. Gu Mengmeng did not emit her beast pressure, but still attracted the attention of the stray beasts like a magnet. Perhaps it was because a female walking around in the battlefield was too eye-catching that the stray beasts all resorted to extreme attacks to get rid of the entanglement in front of them. They then surrounded Gu Mengmeng in 2s and 3s. Elvis was afraid that Gu Mengmeng would be hurt. His eyes were bloodshot, and he could not care less about hurting himself. He released his beast pressure and instantly suppressed the few 4th-level orcs surrounding him. He then quickly ran to Gu Mengmeng's side and protected her in his arms. "Why did you run out? Are you hurt?" Gu Mengmeng's gaze was still darting around. She said anxiously, "Kanwu is missing. I want to find him." Elvis frowned and his eyes shone fiercely. "You are putting yourself in danger for that little wolf pup again." Gu Mengmeng pushed Elvis's hand away. She raised her leg and kicked away the stray beast that had recovered from Elvis's beast pressure, and was about to attack her from behind. She then shook her head and looked at Elvis. "This level of attack is not dangerous to me." Elvis clenched his teeth and said harshly, "The most regretful thing I have done in my life is to let you give birth to them." Elvis carried Gu Mengmeng by the waist and spun her around to protect her against his chest. He turned around abruptly and glared at the bloody beast less than an inch away from his neck with his bloodshot eyes. He squeezed out 2 words through his teeth. "You're courting death." The thick tail was like a steel whip as it viciously lashed at the waist of the ambusher. The stray beast was sent flying 7 to 8 steps away, its intestines and innards scattered along the way, finally disappearing into the bloody ground. Gu Mengmeng separated herself from Elvis's arms and said, "Let's split up and search. We must find Kanwu safe and sound. I can't have another son whose life is uncertain." Elvis really wanted to bite Kanwu to death after finding him, but when he met Gu Mengmeng's worried eyes, he still nodded. He frowned and said, "You're not allowed to get hurt." Gu Mengmeng nodded in agreement. "I know. You be careful too." With that, Gu Mengmeng continued to look for Kanwu in another direction. On the other hand, Elvis clenched his fists and forced himself to turn around as well. He wanted to find that bastard son who was courting death on the battlefield as soon as possible. Only then could Gu Mengmeng stay at the back with peace of mind and not enter this filthy and bloody battlefield. A white figure flashed into Gu Mengmeng's eyes. The snow fox that was supposed to be spotlessly white was now covered in a sinister red color. Its flesh was flipped and blood was flowing out. Leah was injured. Chapter 648. If this bite landed, even if Leah did not die, he would be severely injured. At that critical moment, Gu Mengmeng clenched her fists tightly and her body shook. Instantly, the world shook and everything started to double up. No matter what level the orcs were at, they all fell to the ground at the same time. Worry and fear controlled Gu Mengmeng's emotions. She released her beast pressure unconsciously, and did not even realize that Li's danger had been resolved. A warm embrace hugged the explosive Gu Mengmeng tightly and a gentle voice rang beside her ear. "Xiaomeng, it's all right now. Don't be scared, don't be scared." Puffed Elvis spat out a mouthful of blood from behind Gu Mengmeng's ear. The blood stung Gu Mengmeng's eyes and instantly brought her back to her senses. Turning around, she saw Elvis's weak but relieved smile slowly falling down. Gu Mengmeng reached out to grab him, but could not grab hold of Elvis's body. She could only watch as Elvis turned from his human form into a black wolf and fell down slowly, brushing against her fingertips. The entire battlefield was silent in an instant. There was not a single trace of the bloodbath and howls from a moment ago. Gu Mengmeng stood on the ground that was soaked in blood and lowered her head. However, she could not differentiate those who fainted from her beast pressure, and those were already dead corpses. The moonlight was still hazy, and it was like a veil that shrouded the wailing battlefield, adding a sense of coldness and mystery to the bloody scene. Gu Mengmeng stood in the moonlight, and her legs felt as heavy as lead. She clearly knew that she had lost control at that moment. If Elvis had not hugged her, by the time she regained her senses, she would have been the only living thing here. Gu Mengmeng just stared blankly at everything, her gaze wooden and empty. Silence. The world was so silent that even the wind did not dare to enter this cruel scene. Suddenly, her vision blurred and Gu Mengmeng fainted on the ground without any warning, as if she was a puppet whose soul had been sucked out. Under the moonlight, a person walked towards her from afar. A pair of fox ears were rather conspicuous as he walked towards Gu Mengmeng step by step from the pile of corpses. He was calm and elegant, his gaze gentle and persistent, as if he was not stepping on a ground full of corpses, but a path full of fresh flowers. Walking to Gu Mengmeng's side, he bent one knee to touch the ground, his slender fingers gently caressing Gu Mengmeng's cheeks. He smiled dotingly and indulgently, his cold voice carrying a tinge of malice, as if he was a stubborn husband indulging his beloved wife to fool around. He said, Gu, don't be anxious. I will let you slowly see that only I, Cole, am qualified to stand by your side in this world. I will stand at the top of the world with you and look down on everyone. It won't be long before you'll get tired of these pieces of trash that are holding you back, and then kill them with your own hands. I will plan everything for you, and then stand at the most dazzling place, waiting for you to come to my side. As Cole said, he slowly bent down, wanting to kiss Gu Mengmeng's cheek. However, when he was only an arm's length away, he felt an intense pain on his face. Cole paused for a moment and stepped back. When he touched his face again, it had already started to rot. Cole clutched his wound and stared fiercely at the snake-shaped mark on the back of Gu Mengmeng's neck. His eyes were filled with venom as he said coldly, Snake, you're still hindering me even after you're dead. One day, Gu will cut off your mark for me and let you completely become a dead snake. Dead snake. Aside from the topic, today's update has ended. That babies, there are still 4 more days before February ends. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.